Perversion sick. It's degenerate and sick.
Is it time?
It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day.
We'll know in a very short period of time, but it looks like it could be something that will be not good. Believe me, not good.
I see issue with that. And again, hey.
You're not going to be able to insult your way to the presidency. That's not going to happen.
I don't know who created Pokemon Go, but I'm trying to figure out how we get them to have Pokemon go to the polls.
I'm Ted Cruz, and my pronoun is kiss my ass.
So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create these jobs.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to put
not good. Believe me, not good.
Well, what's up, everybody? A pleasant good evening to you all. Welcome, folks, to the DueDissidence podcast. Keaton Weiss here with Russell Dobular, of course.
Hello.
So we just wanted to address something before we start. A couple of you guys asked, what's up? Where's Norman Finkelstein tonight? Did he get pissed at you guys and cancel? No, he did not cancel.
We took him out for cheesecake. He didn't like the cheesecake. The portions weren't big enough.
he went to the bathroom when the check came, which we
Yeah,
thought was kind of a rude way of, saying we should pay the bill. It's a little presumptuous to do that, so we got into a little argument, and, that's all right. Look, it's fine. It's fine. Things happen.
Well, what I was expecting was a nice piece of cake.
Yeah, exactly. No, Norman Finkelstein is going to come on the show next week, not this upcoming week, but the following week. Midweek, we're going to give him his own night, his own interview, because we're about halfway through his new book, which is a real beast of a book. Russell's going to display it here. Well, don't show that side. Yes, that's the operative angle we need. Show it from the other angle. Show the width of the spine. Oh, see, This is a very thick book. This is like a textbook. So we're about halfway through it. But we thought before we interview him, we should probably read the whole thing. And so we reached out to him yesterday and said, hey, we didn't realize your book was that long when we bought it. So if you wouldn't mind rescheduling, we'd like to wait till we've read the whole thing before we interview about it. And so he said, sure, that sounds great. And we're going to interview him next week. Looks like it's going to be Tuesday the 16th, possibly Wednesday the 17th, but I think Tuesday the 16th we are on for Norman Finkelstein, and that'll be its own show, its own evening, since that should be a great conversation. So that's what's going on with him. So it is just us two tonight. So we hope that you guys all have a good time with us. We are looking forward to this. Patrick Donahue, thank you for getting us started here with that lovely super chat. Your take on the Jordan Neely situation shows you are the leaders of the sane left movement online. Well, thank you. We wish it paid better, but we're happy that we are the leaders of the sane left movement online. The Dems don't care about him or his ilk. They hate them along with the working poor. Well, yeah, we are going to talk a little bit more about that later in the show. Patrick, that might be past your bedtime over there in Ireland, but you can catch it on the rebound. Or if we run long enough, who knows? We might be finishing up right when you wake up tomorrow morning. The way these streams have been going, they've been going pretty long lately.
When we were putting together this episode, we said, listen, the segment we did on Neely and immigration last week, it lost us a lot of subscribers, but I think we could do better.
I think we could do more. Yeah,
I think better. I was like, Keaton, do you think we could lose more subscribers? He said, Russ, hold my beer.
Yeah, exactly. Hold my Miller Lite.
Honestly, really, it's just like, it's not that we really lost. It's that we didn't gain, because every time we gained, people saw those segments and then we would lose. It was like that all week. But hey, man, fuck them if they can't take a joke. If they're offended now, they're not going to be subscribers for long.
Exactly. I mean, that's what I always thought. I don't want to lose subscribers by being like unprofessional or rude to a guest or anything. Right. But if we lose subscribers for saying something people don't agree with, well, that's the price of doing business. What are you going to do? It's a heterodox show with a heterodox audience, and people got to be able to take that.
It's like Red Fox used to say, because people had only seen him on TV, and then all of a sudden, when everyone had VHSs, they got his stand-up and found out how dirty a comedian he was. Right. And he would close out his show going, people say old folks don't like my show. Fuck them. They ain't going to be fans long anyway.
Ryan Wagner asks, I missed the take. What was the gist? The gist was, I think Russell and I are mostly on the same page about this, that, it's not unthinkable that someone would get up and react to a person who's acting erratically on the subway. Like, it's not to say that no reaction was justified, but choking him for 15 minutes was extreme. And so that angered both the people who thought, well, no, fuck him, glad he's dead. It angered those people, and it also angered the people who said that nobody should have touched him at all. So there you go. But what are you going to do?
Well, and also, we got into the mental health thing, and actually, when I went back into the chat and took a look, it was so funny because you had a couple of people. It's always funny to me when you get people who are doctrinaire liberals like that, or doctrinaire left like that, whatever you want to call it, who like they know they have a losing hand, but they feel like they just have to argue with you.
Right.
Like, clearly my argument was compassionate argument. Like, hey, man, this guy was killed by the system. He should have been taken care of. He should have been helped. And you had a couple of half-hearted attempts at, so what? We're empowering the police to lock up more people. Come on, man. Come on. This fucking guy who lives in my building, man, he's threatened to burn the building down, and they keep letting him come back to live here, man. Who's gonna mourn for me if I die in a fire? You're gonna put flowers on my grave?
Right.
Something has to be done about the way.
Right. We're not
deal
talking
with this in
prison.
New York.
We're talking about
no, of course not.
A facility to help treat them. Right. Exactly. All right. Well, we're going to get into that a little bit later. But just want to take care of a little business here. We've had a super chat already. Thank you very much for that. We had 8 new members sign up in our last stream. We debuted our YouTube membership feature. So if you want a little star next to your name and some other perks that come with supporting our show, you can click that join button. It's right under the screen. It's right down there somewhere. Click that join button and help support this program. There are different perks at different levels. It'll explain what they are when you click the button down there. But any help on that front, like I said, much appreciated. If you signed up as a member last show, you are on the patron scroll tonight, which we are going to be rolling through in just a few minutes. But let's start out with some headlines here. Let's go to our friends over at the World Economic Forum, friends of the show over at the World Economic Forum. Michael Evans, the president of the Canadian Alibaba Group, which is an e-commerce group, boasted at the World Economic Forum that he was creating an individual carbon footprint tracker where people can choose. This is going to be voluntary at first, right? Yeah. To monitor their purchases, their dietary habits, and their travel destinations and their mode of travel to get their own individual carbon footprint score. Let's take a look.
Developing through technology an ability for consumers to measure their own carbon footprint. What does that mean? Where are they traveling? How are they traveling?
What that means is that you can blame yourselves for global warming and not us. Because the top 1% of income earners on Earth produce 1,000 times, not 100 times, 1,000 times the carbon footprint as the bottom 1%.
Of course.
But
of course,
if you track your own carbon footprint and you emit 18 tons per unit of time as opposed to the average, which is 16 tons, then you can blame yourself for it and not us. Isn't that great? Isn't that great? You, as the individual, can bear the burden of environmental decay rather than try to implement any sort of systemic change that might influence our carbon footprint consuming habits. How do you like that? How novel?
Well, and this is where the so-called left is toothless, because they take these issues that the left is very passionate about, like climate change, and they co-opt them, and they put out these statements that are absolutely absurd if you look at who they're coming from. But it keeps a lot of people who are liberal or from going after Davos,
right?
From going after the World Economic Forum,
right?
From
how many of these guys are going to
Bill
volunteer
Gates.
to put a tracker on themselves, right?
Right,
because the results
right.
wouldn't be pretty,
right? Well, okay, so we'll do this if you have to reduce your carbon footprint to that of the average person. How about that?
Exactly. Well, let's hear him out. Let's let him finish.
What are they eating? What are they consuming on the platform? So, individual carbon footprint tracker. Stay tuned. We don't have it operational.
Look how proud he is.
Something that we're working on.
There we go. Yeah. That's something that they are working on. Yes, if they agree to track their own behavior, then that would be a great thing. Who knows how many of them are going to volunteer for it? But every ordinary person can see how innocent or guilty they are of contributing to climate change by downloading this carbon tracker app. I heard it has great integration with the Mastodon app so that all the virtue signalers can take it to the next level. You just integrate that with your Mastodon and it automatically posts every day how much carbon you emitted into the atmosphere that previous day. If you eat a hamburger, that's a lot. Right. So maybe turn it off if you're going through a White Castle or something like that. You know, if you're going out for Chinese, stay in vegetarian, Indian food. Obviously, you want to turn it on. Make sure you track those meals. But yeah, an individual carbon footprint tracker How do you like that?
Yeah, and if you criticize this, and if you criticize them, this is the trick they pull. You're right wing.
Right, you're right. You're a climate denier.
You're a climate denier. It's a beautiful grift that they've got going. It really is ingenious, right?
Oh, yeah, exactly.
They get their planes, their yachts, their mansions. They deploy these tactics of social control, and they've convinced the professional managerial class that if you're against it, you're deplorable. You're a deplorable, right? You're a MAGA person.
Right. You're not willing to track your own carbon footprint. Why not? That's right. Strange. What do you got to hide?
All right. This is the point that a lot of the right was making about the way that the liberal class took government narratives about the schmaxine and about the virus of unknown origin. And they're not wrong. They're not wrong. People who are attracted to those politics are the bring an apple to the teacher kids. They're the ones who really want to be approved of very much, who don't have any strong backbone or need to express themselves in an individual way. Their way of expressing themselves is by showing how deeply they're willing to conform to narratives that have been given to them by authority figures. They want to be good boys and girls, and they play on that. That's why ideas like that don't shock and horrify the PMCs and people who are outside of that. I mean, do you call them right wing? I don't know what you call them, but you don't hear criticism of that from the liberal class. It sounds like a grand idea to them, and they never call out the contradiction. They never call out the
idea. Right.
Yeah, and they never call out the contradiction. Like, well, how much carbon do you think this person pitching this? What do you think their carbon footprint is? Right. You probably used up as much carbon in this whole get together as the rest of the planet uses in a month.
Exactly, with all the jets and stuff. Right, exactly. All right, so here's some news that I did not pay much attention to. My wife, I will admit, is a bit of an Anglophile. And, she approaches these issues with curiosity. She says, it's
all
not
right,
out
there
of
is
any
nothing,
respect.
nothing against your wife, man. There is nothing that makes me sicker than an American who has a fascination and admiration for the royal family.
Well, she doesn't have an admiration for the royal family, but she, is interested in it the way people are interested in history or sports or whatever. It's a field of study, right? It's not an admiration. Okay. It's not an adoration. It's not a reverence.
No, those Americans will be like,
yeah.
Oh, did you see what Camilla said?
Yeah, no. I mean, it doesn't come up in conversation. It's just like an area of study for her. And so she watched the coronation of King Charles. What was that, yesterday morning? I think it was yesterday morning. I don't know. The days all blend into each other now. But it was on very, very early in the morning.
Yeah, like Americans who followed very closely the succession after the Queen died like it was important.
Exactly. I mean, nothing could possibly interest me less than the royal family. Like, it's something I know very, very little about. I'm not really interested in it. That's why we're not really covering it all that much, except
at least Paris Hilton made a sex tape.
Yeah, that's true. What
do these people do?
There was a protester, his name is Patrick Thelwell. He was spotted on recognition cameras, like facial recognition cameras, and apparently was snatched from the protest in handcuffs. The handcuffs were so tight they actually cut his skin. Here he is being dragged away.
This is fascism! I'm being arrested just for being here!
So there were some protests, obviously, at King Charles's coronation, and I saw, Russell, you posted something on your personal Facebook wall about the people of Britain wanting to sort of dissociate themselves from this. I don't know what the opinion polls there are of the royal family, but what was your impression?
It sounds like people are more disenchanted with them than I've ever heard Britons be. At somebody else who was a fan of one of the soccer clubs there tell me that they were booing at the end of the match. They were booing the coronation. So I'm told by, on good authority, my daughter lives on the Emerald Isle, that things are a fucking mess there, man. That they've got, high energy prices, high unemployment, high inflation. And England, it sounds like basically England has followed our austerity economics more than any other country in Europe, but their economy is worse than ours. So it's really fucking people, that combination. Like it's weird because you don't usually hear this about places in Europe, but you hear stories about the closed library that doesn't have funding anymore. And, the towns where the schools are falling apart. You don't hear that about any place else in Europe, really. In Western Europe, anyway. So it sounds like this is at a very bad time. This is at a time when Britons, very much like a lot of other people in the West, have lost faith in all of their institutions. So to see this guy and his, mistress turned queen doing this big empty ceremony for this institution, this anachronistic institution that serves no real purpose in the modern world other than for them to live off the tit of the people of England. It seems like it played worse this time than I've ever seen anything like this play with Britons. If you ever saw the movie, what was it called? Was it called The Queen? The movie about Diana's death, and it was really about the reaction of the royal family. That was with
that was with Helen Mirren, right?
With Helen Mirren playing Elizabeth. And what surprised me most about that movie is at one point they say, like, it's very shocking, 24% of people think we should get rid of the monarchy. And as an American, I'm like, that's it? That's as bad as it got? Like, that was the crisis? I would think that would be the baseline, at least. I would think the baseline would be higher. I would think the baseline would be around 50%, actually. So that was the crisis? I'd be curious to see what the number is now, because it seems like the country is souring on the monarchy at this point.
Yeah, indeed. All right, we're going to take some super chats, and then we're going to go slightly out of order here because I saw this. I'm really glad, Buckeye Fan 05, that you said this first, because we were planning on talking about this. We didn't want to come off as assholes for talking about this, but I had the exact same reaction. Marianne Williamson and the Vanguard were both at Crystal and Kyle's wedding this weekend. Talk about wanting to keep access to politicians. Well, thank you, Buckeye Fan. And when we clip this segment, we're going to start it with your super chat. How's about that? We're going to begin the clipped version of this with a featured super chat from you, my friend. We obviously did not plan that, but happy to give you the shout out here. So yeah, we saw this here. So Corin, who is one half of the Kyle and Corin show, apparently they do like joint podcasts together from time to time. I don't think I've ever watched one, but I know that they do. I
wasn't even aware of such a thing.
Yeah. It doesn't happen that often, but every now and then. The Vanguard Pod fam with the homies Zach and Gavin at Crystal and Kyle's wedding last night. Okay, so they scored an invite to Kyle and Crystal's wedding. Good for them. It's funny how they accuse everyone else in this business who's on a certain side of things of bull riding a certain other host who we've never been invited to any function of his. It seems like they're the ones doing the bull riding here. But anyway, who cares about them? This is the bigger thing. This is Corin with Marianne Williamson at Kyle and Crystal's wedding. Now listen. I don't really want to be an asshole about this. I think what Kyle's doing is pretty gross with this Marianne thing. What Crystal's doing is pretty gross as well. It is their wedding. Mazel tov, like whatever. Wish them the best to the happy couple. Fine. Who cares? However,
is that why you got rid of that ridiculous hair for the wedding?
Maybe, that's a good question. That's an interesting theory.
So it was like right before the wedding.
That's an interesting theory that you might be onto something there. But what I will say about this is that imagine Joe Biden during campaign season right now made an appearance at, say, George Stephanopoulos' wedding, or his kid's confirmation, or bar mitzvah, whatever he is. And he posted a picture of that online. A candidate for president attending a major family event with a member of the media. There is absolutely zero doubt in my mind that both Crystal and Kyle would do a segment talking about how brazenly corrupt that is.
Yep.
And yet you have these guys, these two, who basically, as RBN rightfully said, they basically recruited Marianne to run. When they interviewed her last year, they're like, I think you should run for president.
Right.
They basically recruited her into the race. Now she's appearing at their wedding.
It was like Bill Clinton and Donald Trump.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly. And does this not suggest, I'm sorry, that they understand her campaign is going nowhere? Because let's say they actually believed that she's going to catch fire and she's going to become a contender. Would they not understand that at that point, this would kind of become an issue for her? That, hey, these two prominent indie media people who have propped up your candidacy, here you are at their wedding. What's that about? Isn't that weird? Isn't that collusion of a certain kind? Isn't that corruption of a certain kind? They would understand that that would be bad optics, which means they know. Of course they know she's not going anywhere. Of course they know she's running as a favor to them, more or less. That's the way it's functioning in their eyes. And so, yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out, my friend, on the super chat, because we were going to cover that. Not a lot, but I thought those points were worth making. What do you think?
Yeah, and to just show you we're not total assholes. We weren't going to cover this story at all because we were just like, it's their fucking wedding, man. Like, so there's a line. There's a line.
Right.
When we saw Marianne was there, that made it newsworthy.
Right, because that's a candidate. It's the candidate who they're promoting. No, if it was just a Vanguard guys, I wouldn't do. I'm not going to troll their wedding, right? But that's not what this is about. This is about if a candidate for presidency appears at the wedding of the media people who are most propping them up,
who are running around claiming that this is a legitimate presidential bid, and they just have her at the wedding. You're right. Like, doesn't that tell you they know that this is a farce?
Right, because it would be somewhat of a scandal if her candidacy ever became serious. Like, it would be. People would want to know. Why are you getting invitations to the media? Why are you going to these media people's wedding?
I mean, we're covering it tonight, but they made it very clear. And are we going to do that segment with the congressman too?
With what congressman? What are you talking
about? The thing I sent you over with the congressman. You know, the thing about the congressman with the banking, with the Bidens, with all that shit.
Oh, yeah. I have a little slide that we'll show for that when the time comes.
All right. So, yeah, we're gonna be covering this, but the Democratic Party made it very clear in no uncertain terms. No, there's no competition. There's no primary. There's no debate. There's no nothing. The only proviso we will give is what I was just in such elegant fashion asking Keaton about. There's a Republican congressman. What's his name? Comer, yeah. Who's going to be doing a press conference about Biden family follies. We'll get into that. That could make, if they have what they say they have, that could make his running untenable. But at which point, who are they turning to? Marianne?
No, they're going to run
Simone Sanders is going to pick up the phone. Marianne, come off the bench. We need you.
Yeah, no, it'll be Pete. It'll be Kamala. They'll pick somebody else. They'll have Newsom ready to go.
They'll pick one of their goons.
You're right. If something happens like that, they're going to recruit somebody.
I mean, if they want a chance in hell at winning, they'd probably go with Newsom at that point, I think.
All right, well, let's save that for when it's more appropriate.
Yeah, we're jumping.
Yeah, we don't want to step on it. All right, let's take a couple more of these here. Mr. Fancy Pants, $1.99. I thought your take was non-controversial. You mean on the Jordan Neely? Yes, so did we.
But please stay a subscriber because we need more of your kind.
Look, sometimes but this is the world of siloed media. Whereas the take that appears non-controversial to the average person is the most controversial take you can have in this space because it's a tribal space.
It's interesting, man. Like you'll get people who will, and this has happened through the whole history of the show, and I'm sure it happens to other people too. People drift onto your channel because they agreed with a take or two that you had. And as soon as they disagree with you, they get the vapors.
Right, exactly.
Oh my God, they challenged me. Ah.
Right.
It's okay to disagree. And we have a lot of people who disagree with us on a lot of things.
Yeah,
exactly. What's wrong with that?
Hang out. 400 watching, only 161 likes. Yeah, I can't take the like count here, but yes, please. Thank you, both parties of traders. Let's keep going.
Stepping up.
Like. Hit that like button, please. Nicole Vance becomes a member. Well, thank you, Nicole. We appreciate that very much. That's very kind of you. Members get certain perks associated with being members. Those are all described there below. At a certain tier, we treat your chats as super chats, so you get permanent super chat status. That's fun. But thank you very much. It really does help us quite a bit. Franklin, thanks for the super sticker, my friend. Much appreciated. Tusker says, oh, goody, we can get carbon canceled. Now, yeah, they'll track all that shit, and they'll nix you if your carbon footprint's too high.
It is kind of, it's like a right-wing meme to use. Who's the Ralph in The Simpsons? They like to use him as a meme for like left-wing idiocy. Like that's something they would make a meme of, like him picking his nose saying, they told me if I get this app, the weather will get gooder.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, yeah, that's funny. Tom, thanks for the $5. Tom is a member. Thank you very much. Let's not forget that if I could track my carbon footprint with my phone, so can the tax man. Yes, that's probably true.
Hey man, you got all these people talking about how they're trying to crash the banks on purpose to push us all into centralized digital currency. I'm not prepared to commit to that point of view. But the dangers of a centralized government digital currency that people who favor that view point out, that shit is for real because they point, hey, look at what they did to the Canadian truckers with debanking them. If you really get rid of all cash and all currency becomes like the credits in Star Trek, where it's electronic, it's in the ether and issued by some central authority, they can always just take it away from you. You can never hide any currency from them.
Right. I like this one. Eric, thanks for the $5. When Bernie came, did he make Kyle leave his wedding? That's a reference for those who don't know. Back when Bernie did an interview with Crystal and Kyle, he insisted that only Crystal be there. He didn't want Kyle to interview him. He made Kyle sit it out. And so, good joke.
I will attend the wedding, but I will not be there for the actual ceremony because you can't do that without the groom.
Right, exactly. Mad Crab said Zach's mom is a staffer for a senator in Missouri. Well, that's good. She did very well for herself. Maybe Russell regrets not calling her back. See, we could have had an in Missouri politics. Eric, thanks for the $5.
I still have her number somewhere.
Yeah, somewhere. An expert on Nostradamus has claimed that King Charles' reign could be short. Well, that's the thing. I mean, he is up there in age. I mean, they could have a new king fairly soon. KN Kareem, thank you for the $9.99. I disagreed. The royal family brings tourism for UK. They do bring tourism there, that is for sure. They have an anti-monarchist movement in the UK for decades. That's not a new thing. However, most Brits like their royal family. Yeah, you know who really loves the royal family is Piers Morgan. Man, Piers Morgan is a real simp for the royal family.
This is what I'm suggesting. That may be changing. I know that's true. I'm suggesting it seems like the mood is a little more sour now. And also, hey, man, I mean, if they're going to bring in tourism, they should earn their money. They should put them on one of those, like, you throw the ball at the target and they fall into the dunking pool. If they do that outside Buckingham Palace, I'd say fair enough.
Indeed. But no, it does bring in some money. Meteor Dreams, Caleb Maupin is cringe. Just had to say it. Cold prop. All right. I don't know much about Caleb Maupin, but thank you for the comment, Meteor Dreams. We appreciate that. And thanks for the $2.99 super sticker once again. Franklin, I just took it off my screen, so I can't put it up there, but I did see it, and so thank you. All right, let's go to our third headline of the evening before we get into our main segments. We kind of stayed off of this story for a little while just because we thought it was kind of uninteresting, but now we found that the story has taken a somewhat comic turn here in the sense that now Anheuser-Busch is getting backlash from the other side because of Chicago gay bar.
Again, we have been good. We've stayed off this story.
Right. A Chicago gay bar will refuse to sell Bud Light after Anheuser-Busch disavowed any involvement with Dylan Mulvaney after the sales tanked 26%. The Chicago Gay Bar, Two Bears Tavern Group, that's a good name for a gay bar, Two Bears, announced Thursday they will no longer serve Bud Lights, especially in Chicago since the Bears are the football team. So it's got a double meaning.
Yeah.
Damn, I like that. Bar officials denounced the beer companies abandoned their support of their partnership with trans influencer Dylan Mulvaney. It comes as Anheuser-Busch reported a 26% drop in sales amid backlash. Russell?
Yeah, I cannot recall a case where of a greater marketing unforced error than what Anheuser-Busch is now fired. I mean, fired. They say leave of absence because they were trying to avoid this kind of a backlash. But they basically fired the people responsible. It's a no-win situation. It's a no-win situation. They can't get back their core beer drinkers without disavowing that ad campaign. And after trying to wait for this to blow over, and it just kept getting worse, finally, they had to do their earnings call. They did their quarterly earnings report, blamed it on an outside advertising company, claimed they got rid of the advertising company. It was never meant to be an ongoing campaign. And of course, I mean, now they kept stepping up to that. It almost like they were trying to disavow this campaign and hoping not to hit the tripwire of triggering the LGBTQ part of their customer base. But now they did it. Now they, on the earnings call, they hit the tripwire. I honestly think they fucked themselves so bad that the brand can't recover. Like, there's nothing they can do that won't piss somebody off. Nobody was demanding that they get into this. And it wasn't hurting them with their core consumer that they've given $13 million to LGBTQ causes over the last 10 years. That wasn't hurting them. Nobody was saying, God damn pride flags on the Bud Light. Nobody was saying that. You know,
yeah, but they also made a lot of contributions to conservative organizations.
They
as
did,
well.
which is not unusual.
Overall, they are fairly right wing. I mean, if you look at their open secrets here, I'll pull this up here. I mean, a whole lot of red going there. Right? Some blue, some blue, not all, but overwhelmingly, they've been a pretty conservative company. Yeah.
Well, it's the same as with Disney. Will cover up black people when they have to sell their movie in China. You know?
Right, exactly.
But they'll be all about that diversity. They'll jump out in front of that parade all day, right? So yeah, same bullshit. But this was just maybe this is going to go down in the annals of business history as a case study. They'll be teaching this in business school for decades. It's like of a no-win. This is the Kobayashi Maru of beer marketing. They have just walked into.
You might say it'll go down in the annals of business history.
In the annals of business history. Yeah. Now they
immature joke.
A little immature. I was like trying to go past it. I was like, it was so immature. I lost my train of thought, but now I got it back. All right. So they interviewed the idiot, the rich girl who they hired. I'm not kidding. She lives in like an $8 million apartment on Central Park South, I think. And, family money, not money she made at Budweiser. This idiot, she did an interview talking about how the brand was too fratty and they had to change the brand because it was losing market share. It's not losing market share because of its generational demographics. It's losing market share because it tastes like shit and there are other options now. It's losing market share to craft beer. It's losing market share to better beer that you can buy. It's not like it used to be when you had Bud, you had Miller, you had like Schlitz, Pabst Blue Ribbon.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a different world, microbreweries. You can't get that back with Bud Light. Bud Light tastes like fucking garbage, man. I mean, it's just, that's why. It has nothing to do with the demographic they're aimed at. In fact, you better try to cling to that demographic because those people are too old to change now. They're not going to turn around and be like, God damn, I had no idea beer was supposed to taste like this, right? They've been drinking Bud Light since high school. They're going to keep drinking it. You better hold on to those people like gold because once they're gone, nobody's going to drink it.
Yeah, that's what they know. Exactly. I bought a six-pack. See, yesterday was Cinco de Mayo, so we were having some Mexican food, and that like Mexican food is a good food to pair with a cheap beer. You don't want a heavy craft beer because it's too much, right? So you want a nice light, ice cold, cheap beer.
Right.
Now the Mexican beer is actually quite good. Like a Modelo is pretty good, for a lager and stuff like that. But the thing is, it's not twice as good as the Bud or the Miller, and it's twice the price because it's imported. So I'm like, all right, you know what? I'm just gonna grab a 6-pack of a cheap beer, and I would have gotten a Bud, but I always just go with what's the cheapest because they all taste pretty much exactly the same. Yeah. But it did occur to me, so if I buy the Bud Light and I get like a MAGA guy checking me out, is he going to think that I'm buying this as a statement? On the flip side, if the counter person is a lib and I don't get the Bud Light, are they going to think I'm making a statement by not getting the Bud Light?
I can see why you're such a Seinfeld fan.
Yeah, right, exactly. This is a Seinfeld situation, right?
What do I do? What do I do?
Jerry? What do I do, Jerry?
If I don't buy the Bud Light, they think I'm a bigot.
They think I'm a bigot. If I buy the Bud Light, they think I'm a pussy. Yeah. And so I just go with
I'm just getting the Miller.
I got a 6-pack of Miller for $6.63, and not only was it a 6-pack, but it was 6 pints. It wasn't 6 12-ounces. It was 6 pints for $6.63. So it was actually a good buy. That's my rule. I always go with what's cheapest. This way, no matter what anybody says, I could just say, hey, listen, I'm not an activist in the beer aisle. I go with whatever's cheapest. And that was what was cheapest, so that's what I went with. So leave me alone. So if I'm ever confronted, I have my story.
You weren't worried it was going to be like these conservative TikTok videos where all of a sudden you're in drag as soon as you drink the Bud Light.
Yeah, right, exactly. Exactly. Franklin Worsham, thanks for the $4.99. What about the Chevy Nova, which was a beautiful car?
Yeah, that was a car. That was a car to survive a vampire apocalypse in. That was a very like Omega Man kind of car.
Okay, yeah, I maybe that was before my time.
It's like an old school muscle car.
Okay, yeah, I don't recall that. Laugh, thank you for the 10 pounds. I'd be happier being bitten on the neck by a winged bat creature than have my neck under the pointy heels of Neera Tanden or Victoria Nuland. Tusker gets to do anything she wants to be, obviously. Well, thank you, Laugh, for that $10.
That's what we call in showbiz a callback.
A callback, yes, indeed. And we were going to do the Neera Tanden thing tonight, but we forgot to put it on the
we
on the
forgot
docket.
about Neera.
We forgot about it. We snubbed her. That's too bad. But anyway, folks, it is Sunday. You know what that means, and that's a segue into this next segment here. We did a segment on our last show about the Tucker Carlson leaks. Fox News has been leaking a lot of material, some behind-the-scenes video footage, some text messages, video of that phone call between Tucker and the producer of the Fox Nation show that he was doing. This is part of a campaign to smear him, probably to destroy him so that he's not able to compete with them when at some point he goes to a different platform. But this most recent leak, I think, gives us the biggest insight into perhaps why he and Fox parted ways. This suggests that it wasn't necessarily a firing, but that Tucker gave Fox, Rupert Murdoch, an ultimatum. So this is a voicemail that he left for Rupert Murdoch after a dispute with Sean Hannity. Russell, why don't we mute up and full screen this?
This is a DueDissidence exclusive. This is where your member money is going, so we can do these kinds of investigations.
Exactly. So here's a voicemail from Tucker Carlson to Rupert Murdoch regarding his colleague, Sean Hannity.
Yeah, Rupert, Tucker Carlson here. Listen, we all know that Sean Hannity is a jealous, talentless hack who was only hired for his chiseled jawline and only kept around for his willingness to gargle your balls 5 nights a week. But if he's smart enough to read GOP talking points off his prompter, surely he's smart enough to read the Post-it note that I very prominently placed on the microwave in the green room, which said, "Saving for later, do not touch." You see, I was enjoying a Salisbury steak TV dinner before the show tonight, and for fear of getting indigestion on the air, I decided to save the brownie dessert until after the program. So after the show, I go to enjoy my dessert, which I, of course, am entitled to, seeing as it's mine and no one else's, and the brownie has been scooped out of its container and presumably eaten. Who ate it? I can't be certain, and likely never will be. But I do have my suspicions. Seeing as Jesse Waters left early today to meet his mistress for happy hour at Planet Hollywood, it couldn't have been him. Greg Gutfeld has an all-cocaine diet past 2 in the afternoon, And Laura Ingraham, we all know, is clearly anorexic, as many women in her profession are, for better or worse. That leaves Hannity. If not him, who? That's a question no one can answer, and so they don't want me asking it. But I am, right now. And there's nothing anyone can do to stop me. And you know, Rupert, it's one thing for that fat sack of shit to leech off of my viewers, you know, the ones who pass out from fentanyl overdoses halfway through my C block. It's another for him to literally eat the food which I put on my table through my consistent hard work for your company. It's dishonorable. Obviously. It's not how white men snack. Now you might say, Tucker, let it go. It's just a TV dinner. But I'll remind you that it was my stepmother's inheritance from this TV dinner company that made me who I am today. And so this is something I take extremely seriously, and for good reason. And so by Monday morning, Rupert, either Hannity goes or I go. It's your decision. Will you choose wisely? Maybe. I hope so. But maybe not. Once again, this is Tucker Carlson. Have a nice weekend.
All right, so there you have it. Some exclusive footage there. Russell, you got to unmute your mic there because we're back on.
That's an exclusive. That's an exclusive.
That's exclusive.
That's it.
You won't hear that anywhere else.
You're not going to hear it anywhere else because they're going to cover it up.
Right, exactly.
They're going to cover it up. We have an exclusive take on Snackgate.
Yeah, on Snackgate. Exactly. And somebody was asking if that was an AI simulation or if it was my voice. I appreciate the compliment. Because that was, in fact, my voice. Just for the media not to run with that thinking that's an actual Tucker leak. But I don't know if my impersonation was that strong where it could be mistaken for him. But we were gonna dress up as him, but my hair and my facial hair just wouldn't work. So I figured we'd do it as a voicemail. I thought that would be fun. And I think it was. So thank you guys for sticking around for that, humoring us a little bit. Let's go to our Patreon scroll here, patreon.com/DueDissidence. You can help support this show, keep us going there, and get call-in access to these live streams as well as exclusive content. You also help us fund our documentary project with Jose Vega, which we've begun editing, and so we hope to have that done fairly soon. We are very, very excited about that. Patreon members have gotten some exclusive sneak peeks of raw interview footage and some behind the scenes segments there. But you also get a spot on our Patreon scroll here. And you can also get a spot on this scroll by supporting us through YouTube directly. Nicole just joined as a YouTube member. Anybody who joins as a YouTube member, just hit that join button right under the screen. It helps us out a great deal. The more members we can get through Patreon, through Substack, and through YouTube, the more often we can do these streams and the more time we can devote to them, obviously. So this is the first of two Patreon scrolls coming up here. And then we have our second one, which we will get going in just a moment. We also have, by the way, the Russell Dobular Boycott Starbucks Dissident Sweepstakes. We do not have a coffee to taste this evening because we've entered the phase now, Russell, where you're going to have to start ordering stuff online and waiting for it to get here. Is that right?
That's it. I will going forward because I'm just going to order like the rest of what people suggested all at once.
All at once. But if anybody wants to enter those sweepstakes, you can just post a suggestion in the chat, and the winner will receive a comped Substack subscription for life, meaning the perks of a paid Substack subscription for free for the winner of the sweepstakes. So far, I think our leading contender is the San Francisco Bay, right?
I almost wish I could have a 2-tier thing, but the only cheap coffee I agreed to try out was Cafe Bustelo, which for a cheap coffee, that is the best cheap coffee I've ever had. But San Francisco Bay is still a better coffee.
It's still a better coffee, but the Bustelo has grown on you.
It's good. That's what I'm drinking right now, man. So I finished it off. Yeah. No, it's good. It's good. I finished the San Francisco Bay already.
Beautiful. Cyrus, thanks for becoming a member. We appreciate you, Cyrus. As always, thank you so much. What is that? I haven't heard that one yet. Did you upload that today?
That's the Warriors, man.
Right. That's right. Nicole, oh my God, I just spit out my wine laughing. That's alcohol abuse. I'm assuming you're a little behind. Was that from the Tucker segment or something we just said now? Did we crack a joke since then?
That was from the Tucker segment.
That had to be from the Tucker segment. So you're probably about 45 seconds behind us. But thank you, Nicole. We appreciate that very much. And looks like the new members are appearing on the scroll in just a moment here. Like I said, we're sorry this takes a little long now. We might have to put up big cards with everybody's name on it as opposed to a scroll, because the scrolls are now taking quite a long time since we have so many generous people helping to keep us going. That's very moving. That is very inspiring. We thank you all for that very, very much. Our new members should be appearing right on the bottom of that screen in just a moment. Let's take another super chat while we're waiting for that. James Vanderzanden, one of our original supporters back in the old Facebook days, which, by the way, we're not on Facebook tonight. Facebook was having some kind of problem with the streaming integration. So to our Facebook viewers, we hope you found us elsewhere. It's not our fault. It's the streaming service was having a problem getting to you guys.
Yeah, okay. So Facebook, we've talked about this because when we were starting out, we were promoting our articles, we had a whole spreadsheet of Bernie Sanders Facebook sites, and we stopped doing it because Facebook is just full of the craziest fucking trolls. And yeah, man. So Keaton made me an administrator on the Facebooks just to maintain our presence there, because we have over 12,000 and we never really do anything there. No sooner did I start posting than I got a total psycho for 2 days. You're a racist. You're a racist. Impol is a racist term. It's a right-wing dog whistle. I swear to God, no sooner did I post 2 things than I got one of those.
Well, the thing is, Facebook is the biggest of the social media networks, but it's also the most siloed because on Facebook, you can only see what you want. You really get to tailor what you see specifically to you. Whereas Twitter is not quite like that. The people you follow are going to be privileged in your feed, but that's not the only thing you'll see. Whereas Facebook, unless you're friends with somebody, you won't see what they post. Or unless you join a group, you won't see what that group posts. Or unless you follow a page, you won't see what they post. So Facebook is the most siloed. So that's where you get the most committed ideologues.
Okay, you know what I think part of it is as well? I hate to say it, man, but I think it's partly because Facebook, I think, skews older.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say that too.
So you get those people who clearly have not done anything other than to argue with people on social media for the last 5 years. This is how they're spending their fucking retirement. Saying, goddamn fucking right wingers. You can just tell this is a sad situation, man. I'm getting a window into, how you end up if you don't find some worthwhile things to do with your old age, man.
Right. Yeah, exactly. All right, let's get into our main segments of the evening, shall we? Oops, what did I do? I screwed that up. That's all right. I'll fix it later. We have time. All righty. So we've spoken at length, obviously, on this show about the primary campaigns of Marianne Williamson and RFK Jr. and how they are doomed efforts that are not worth anybody's support or investments. Most of you guys on here believe us. Some do not. That's okay. But here we have a clip from Morning Joe, because it's not just us indie media types who are telling you this now. Now you're actually getting the signal from the MSM itself, where Morning Joe dealt with the question of, that recent poll where RFK Jr. was polling at 19%, that's kind of interesting. Joe Scarborough raises the issue with Simone Sanders and says, hey, isn't this worth looking at? Now, Joe Scarborough is a Republican, so perhaps he's not as intimately familiar with how the Democrats do things, which is silly, Joe. Yeah. There will be no Democratic primary. Right. It does not matter what the polls are.
He doesn't have that concept that the voters don't matter.
Don't matter.
In the
right,
Democratic
exactly.
Party.
But she lays it out for him pretty convincingly here. So let's take a listen.
Bobby Kennedy Jr. doing well. He's at 19%. Hasn't really gotten that much out there. I mean, and I'm starting to hear more and more talk about him. Are we going to actually have a challenge here?
I'm trying not to laugh, Joe. There's not going to
Wait,
be.
can I stop you for a second?
Yes.
Do you know
Try not to laugh.
how many people said the same thing
I'm trying
about
not to laugh. He's polling at 19%. That's interesting. Do you think we're going to have an interesting primary? Oh, I'm trying to contain my laughter at the idea that we would let people decide the direction of the party. What are you kidding? Good one, Joe.
Apparently, you weren't taking any notes in 2016 or 2020, Joe.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
We wouldn't even run a fair primary for a credible candidate.
Right. In an open primary season. Not
without an incumbent president.
Exactly.
Come on, man.
She goes on.
Donald Trump in 2015 on this show?
Except
here we go. Listen to this.
For a second.
Yes.
Do you know how many people said the same thing about Donald Trump in 2015 on this show?
Exactly. That's why we're not letting him on a debate stage.
Right. Exactly. That's why we're not going to let RFK have a hearing. Because do you understand what can happen when people get to decide? That's dangerous.
Especially when your candidate is Joe Biden and he could go off on a corn pop anecdote at any given moment on that debate stage.
Exactly.
Said the same exact thing.
Yes, because there was going to be a Republican primary. But I really think that.
Do you remember how people were ridiculing Donald Trump's chances in 2016? She's like, yes, but the reason he broke through is because we had a primary.
We had a primary, and we're not going to.
This time there will be no primary. Right? Yeah. We're not going to make that mistake.
The mealy mouth Democrats, as I like to call them, and some of my progressive friends who would like to live in a fantasy land, they need to come back to reality. Yeah. And the reality is this: the sitting president of the United States of America is a Democrat. A Democrat.
Exactly.
Right there. Right from the horse's mouth. She could not have made more clear that they have absolutely no intention of running any kind of a meaningful primary campaign.
Right. Exactly. This is what we've been telling you this whole time. This is what we've been saying
we told you that from the get-go. Right. And believe me, Crystal knows that. Kyle knows that. Come on, man. I had somebody tell me they didn't think Crystal was grifting, and then they said they were good at their job. I said, if Crystal's not grifting, she's not good at her job, because if she actually believes what she's saying, she doesn't understand how American politics work at all.
Exactly.
And I don't believe that. I think she's a very smart woman. So the only alternative is that she's grifting off that campaign.
Of course.
That would like to run for re-election, so much so that he has declared a re-election campaign. Right. In that case, the Democratic National Committee will not facilitate a primary process. There will be no debate stage for Bobby Kennedy, Marianne Williamson, or anyone else to stand on.
So we're going to have another Bobby Kennedy in an empty chair in the debate, right?
There will be no debate.
Yeah, no debate.
The Democratic National Committee administers the debates, and they're not going to set up a primary process for debates for someone to challenge the head of the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
Okay, now you might think that the viewers are like, wait, what? But no, the viewers are, no, that makes sense. No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
We have to stay united.
Marrying Joe?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right.
Well,
we have to stay united
Carl.
to beat the Republicans.
Eyes.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
The voters like that. This is what you're up against. You're not just up against this. You're up against an army of reliable Democratic primary voters who see that and think, yeah, that's right. There should be no debate. There should be no debates, no voting, no primary process, no nothing, because ultimately democracy is on the ballot. And we have to save democracy from the fascist authoritarian GOPs who don't believe in elections. So we can't hold elections because that endangers our place in the halls of power to protect the electoral process. All right, but MSNBC wasn't the only one.
We have to destroy the village in order to save it.
Exactly. MSNBC was not alone in this take. The issue was also raised on a recent episode of the New York Times podcast called The Daily. Their political correspondent, Jonathan Weissman, gives his take on the prospect of a Democratic primary. So here you get it from the other go-to shitlib outlet, the New York Times, on their podcast. Let's hear this.
Democratic leaders, this is a clear case of it ain't broke, don't try to fix it.
That's a good way to put it. People know Joe Biden.
This is
They've known him
now.
for years and years. It will be very difficult for Republicans to somehow rebrand him. And the Democrats are thinking,
you don't have to rebrand him. His approval rating's like 38%.
Right. What are you talking about? He's talking like they have a popular candidate here.
Right.
This is a guy who's fucking, losing 500,000 brain cells a minute. What do you think? What do you think? You're not going to be able to avoid a Republican debate.
Right.
How do you think that's going to go?
Right. Exactly. All right, here we go.
Not try anything fancy. Let's go for it with Joe Biden. Let's not try anything fancy. Let's go for it with Joe Biden.
And a challenge to Joe Biden, a primary that perhaps might satisfy some Democrats' hunger for a true contest in which the most popular person emerges. You're saying the leadership of the party just thinks that is a bad idea. It can only make things more
quote. Listen to that quote. The people who want a true contest in which the most popular candidate emerges, the leadership thinks that's just a bad idea.
Hunger for a true contest in which the most popular person emerges. You're saying the leadership of the party just thinks that is a bad idea. It can only make things more complicated. Let's not even entertain that idea.
But they're saving democracy.
And let's look at what's happened in the past when an incumbent president has faced a fairly serious challenger in a primary. There was Jimmy Carter, who had to beat back Ted Kennedy, and then there was George H.W. Bush, who had to beat back Pat Buchanan. In both cases, they limped out of the primary season and were beaten by the opposite party in the election.
Okay, this is the level of stupidity that gets you a place as the New York Times political correspondent. The reason Jimmy Carter faced a primary challenge from Ted Kennedy is the same reason George H.W. Bush faced a primary challenge from Pat Buchanan, which is they both sucked. And they were both usually unpopular. They were weak. In other words, they faced the primary challenge because they were weak.
They're flipping it around that it's the primary challenge that made them weak.
Right.
The primary challenge wouldn't have been so strong if they weren't weak.
Right. They didn't become weak because of the primary challenge. They had a primary challenge because they were weak. Because they were weak. Think of the idiocy of this. Think of what fucking jokes these people are. And these are the elite media outlets of the liberals in this country. This is why I call these people are the stupidest people, not in America, in the history of America. The dumbest motherfuckers in the history of this country are the ones who can listen to this and think, oh, you're right, Ted Kennedy primaried Jimmy Carter and Jimmy Carter lost. Wow, that means we should never primary anybody ever again. No, what it means is that you get primaried when you suck ass.
When you suck, which is how it's supposed to work.
Right, exactly.
That's how it's supposed to work. That's the democracy that you're supposedly saving.
Unbelievable. Just fucking unbelievable. Now, you might be listening to this and say, well, it sounds like Keaton and Russell, you're advocating for a primary. We're saying if you could get a primary, sure. If you could get a fair primary, then go for it. But you can't. You can't because of shit like this. You cannot. And therefore, it is a waste of time to try it.
When you come to us and you say RFK and Marianne and all this shit, what we're hearing is, yes, I know the casino has loaded dice, but if we keep rolling, eventually we're going to win.
Right. Unbelievable. This is what you're up against. This is the loaded dice. This is the blackjack dealer right here. The Daily, Morning Joe, all this fucking absolute garbage, brain dead garbage that these fucking morons eat up. Let's keep listening.
Democrats don't want that to happen. And there's a good reason for that, because if Joe Biden faces an opponent, especially a more liberal opponent, he'll be pulled to the left on very difficult issues. And
just like last time,
he might have to embrace positions to win over Democrats that would come back to haunt him in November against the Republican candidate.
Right. So what he's saying is we shouldn't.
If there's anything I think Joe Biden will be able to do, it's to jettison any principled positions he might have taken when they become inconvenient. I don't think that would really be his problem.
Well, it's that, and also, I mean, just once again, that statement just on the face of it. We wouldn't want Democratic voters influencing their candidate in the fall. pressuring him to take certain positions that might compromise him against the Republicans. Like, you know, I mean, look, this is what I noticed in 2020. You had this very tumultuous, cataclysmic year that we all went through that year, thinking maybe some change will come out of this. Yet, at the same time, when you saw Biden and Trump take that debate stage, they were literally competing over who was going to change less. It was literally a status quo debate. The moderator would say, Mr. Trump, you want to take this and change it in this way. No, I don't. Mr. Biden, you want to take this and change it in this way. No. It was literally two people saying, no, don't worry. We're not going to do anything. We're not going to do anything.
I'm going to cut some ribbons and I'm going to take some pictures.
Exactly. It was a contest to see who would do less. And we're still in that contest. That's why, as we said on RBN last week, you know, and as we've said in a few previous shows, this is how the normies have come to dominate this process. And this is what makes electoral politics very unpredictable at this moment, because the range of ideas that are permissible in that forum is just so small that within that tiny space, anything can happen. These races are going to be so close and decided by such few people with such narrow ideas that it could go either way. It's 50-50. It really is.
Right. You know, as you know, I am of the opinion that Joe Biden cannot win. I don't care who the Republicans put up. I'm pretty convinced of that. And they don't have anybody aside from him who can win. So we're going to get a little bit into the demographics of the 2022 midterms. You know, when I was looking at that, I was looking for something else, and we'll get into that later. But there were some stats there that really surprised me. Like, actually, the Republicans did better with white women in 2022 than 2020. So that's better post Roe. That was very surprising.
Yeah, that's a surprising statistic. Yeah.
They did better with Latinos in 2022
they did better overall.
I mean,
they won the popular vote in 2022, which they obviously did not in either of the two main cycles.
Right. Yeah. So there were some indications there that Roe v. Wade may not be as deadly for them as one might think. Now, it would kind of reinforce the Ron DeSantis argument. Like, look how well he did with Democrats. These suburban white women will flip Republican because they can always get an abortion.
Yeah, the question is, though, in a presidential year, because you look at overall national voting trends in a midterm, you have to pay attention to, and this is why the Senate races went the Democrats' way. This is why the governor's races went the Democrats. You have to look at where, right? It's not just a matter of overall Republicans fared better among white women, but in a swing state, which could not only go either way in a presidential year, but could go either way in terms of who its state representatives are, in terms of its governor's house, right? They will probably be more protective of those reproductive rights than, say, you know, whatever, a white woman in New York who always votes red, you know, for whom it doesn't matter as much. So that's where it becomes complicated.
Well, I mean, the Republicans did well in New York relative to
they did very well
other places.
Right. Because in New York, right here in the Hudson Valley, which is where the Republicans basically won the House because of Sean Patrick Maloney's musical chairs bullshit that he pulled, those districts went red because you had a lot of PMC white women who were anti-crime, so they wanted to vote Republican because they thought the Republicans were better on crime. Those Rockland County, you know, upper middle class housewives are almost all pro-choice, but it didn't matter to them that the Republicans weren't because they live in New York,
right?
So they can vote
it's
red.
It's inconceivable for them to make it illegal in New York. It did hurt Zeldin though, because he had expressed pro-life views, and that was just a deal breaker.
Yeah,
if
Zeldin
he did,
came
if he
fairly
didn't
close, he only came about 5 points.
5
short.
points. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Which in New York, I mean, that's
very close for a Republican in New York. Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Should we go on to our next segment, or do we want to tease out that James Comer announcement, because this is somewhat related to primary talk, because this was the caveat that Russell was talking about earlier in the show.
We want to get into that.
So we do want to get into this. This is just a headline here. There's no video, but Representative James Comer says, I know the country and policy decision linked to alleged Biden FBI document. Comer says he's very confident the document exists. So basically, James Comer and some Republican lawmakers in the oversight committee are teasing out a press conference on Wednesday in which they plan to reveal some Biden family corruption that they claim they have pretty damning evidence for. And so whether or not this will be strong enough for them to pursue an impeachment, obviously the impeachment would almost certainly result in a not guilty verdict in the end, just as Trump's did. That's a question, though, whether they will go through with that process. It's also a question of how it will hurt Joe Biden's chances for becoming the nominee. I mean, that would have to be the bombshell of all bombshells for the Democrats to try and dump Biden.
Okay. The left media, even the alternative left media, has kind of been ignoring this story. That's why I wanted to give it a little oxygen. There is no doubt in my mind, based on the history, not only with Hunter, but with James Biden, Joe Biden's brother, that the essence of this is true, that the Biden family has been doing influence peddling with foreign actors around the world. Now,
that's more or less provable. I mean, Hunter's position on the Energy Board itself is influence peddling.
Sure.
Why else would he be there? There's no conceivable reason why he'd be there.
And James Biden has a long history of shady dealings, too, that are connected to politics and foreign actors. So he did an interview I think it was this morning on Fox, where he's claiming they have solid evidence of the Biden family and Joe Biden influence peddling, that they have evidence of basically limited partnerships that they set up to receive this money, that they have evidence of bank transfers. And he said very strongly that the FBI should take no action on Hunter Biden before that press conference on Wednesday. So he felt confident enough to go on TV and basically tell the FBI, don't fuck with us. We've got the goods and we're dumping them on TV on Wednesday. So I wouldn't just dismiss this. And like I said, I'm pretty confident that there is such corruption to be proved. Do they have the goods? It seems like they do. It doesn't seem like they talk it up to this point if they really didn't have anything. At that point, if they really have it, of course, the liberal press is going to circle the wagons. But if it's bad enough, they're not going to be able to suppress a story like that when one of the two major political parties is pushing it. At that point, is Biden so damaged that they decide they can't run him? Yeah, impeachment, sure. I mean, they might, just as a gesture, because they impeached Trump, go ahead with an impeachment proceeding. They have the House.
Yeah, they could if they wanted to.
Yeah, they might just do it, obviously.
As a kickoff to campaign season, if nothing else. You know,
right, yeah, just go ahead and start an impeachment proceeding. In fact, if they really have all this, I would give it a better than 50% chance they would do that.
Right. It's not like there's going to be a big sympathy outpouring for Joe Biden if he gets impeached. I mean, it's pretty obvious to everyone who's not just a dug-in ideologue already that there has to have been some sort of influence peddling there. I mean, there's no way Hunter has that job if there's not.
Right.
I mean, the very fact that he had the job is proof of that. Right. And so what? People are going to say, oh, they're going too hard on Joe. I mean, people like we are past that point. You know, we've been past that point for a while, but certainly when they impeached Trump the first time, I mean, that was it. And it's like, you know, there is no sympathy vote anymore because, you know, everything is just so extremely polarized that I don't think you're getting a sizable portion of voters being like, oh, yeah, you know, they shouldn't have come down so hard on Trump. Maybe I'll vote for him because I feel bad for him. Same thing for Biden. That's just not the world we live in anymore. You know, in the 90s, yes, not now. Not now.
10% for the big guy.
10% for the big guy. That's right. Franklin, $1.99 for the big guys here. Thank you, Franklin. We appreciate that. Courtney, $15. Thank you, Courtney. Payment to Russell for my coffee brand recommendation, Stumptown. Russell, have you tried Stumptown before?
I have not. Well,
okay. I think that's New York based. Isn't it?
Actually, I've probably tried it at Donut Plant. I think that's their brand.
Okay.
No, they do Intelligentsia. So no, I probably haven't done Stumptown.
You ever get any coffee from that Puerto Rico importing down in the West Village?
No. I mean, that would be, just have them give you the beans.
Yeah, their stuff is pretty good.
That would be the shit.
They were on a food tour of mine that I did. They were not bad. Protect democracy from deplorables. Please vote them. Yes, Franklin, indeed. Tom S. Did Crystal wear whites? I believe she did. Thank you, Tom. Where was our invite? Well, we going to get lost in the mail? Well, we haven't done enough for them. There appears to be an assumption.
They didn't think we'd put enough in the envelope.
Exactly. There appears to be an assumption. Thank you, Cool Blue. Haven't seen you in a while, Cool Blue. Thanks for being here. There appears to be an assumption that all people who voted the 2016-2020 Democratic presidential nomination to Bernie Sanders are self-identified Dems. They're not. No, it's true that they're not anymore, although there were a higher percentage of them in 2020 were than in 2016. That's one of the reasons why he, kind of failed to break that 35% line, because a lot of the populist Bernie supporters in 2016 defected to Trump. So by 2020, they were already Trump voters.
Yep.
So there were fewer of them in 2020 than there were in 2016, and they're going to be, I think, far fewer of them now because, we didn't end up voting in the 2020 primary because it was over by the time that day came around. But we both supported Bernie in 2020, whereas any Democrat who runs now, we're not going to advocate anybody go to work for. And so even our sort of contingent of 2020 Bernie supporters is gone. So that coalition becomes more and more filtered with each time because more and more people rightfully say, fuck this, we're not doing this anymore. Virtuoso, thanks for the $5. I worked at the New York Times as a contracted janitor. It's filled with apple polishers. This New York Times podcast certainly relies on liberal style self-importance. Yeah, exactly. That's interesting that you work there. But yeah, no, I mean, that podcast is, look, anybody who wants an insight into their minds, just listen to that.
Sure.
Even more so than the MSNBC, because the MSNBC TV is still TV. It's still entertainment. It's still a show. You want to get a sense of the true pseudo-intellectual cosmopolitan shit-lib moron who thinks they're smarter than everybody else. You got to listen to that podcast. That says it all right there.
And NPR.
Right. And NPR. Absolutely. But NPR will at least gesture that they're sympathetic to the progressives in a way, whereas New York Times is just yeah, no, listen, I know there are people who want us to vote for our candidates, but leadership just does not think that's a great idea. So we're not going to do it. Oh, really? Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Well, NPR famously pronounced that they were not going to report on the Hunter Biden laptop because it was
that's true. They're loyal blue teamers at the end of the day.
Look,
sure.
I had a tabula rasa experience with NPR because I had an actor who really didn't have politics, and she fell down the NPR rabbit hole, and she was a virulent Bernie Sanders hater as a result. That told me what they're feeding people on NPR because she didn't know anything.
Right.
So how did she wind up thinking that when this is the only thing she listens to, right? Clearly that's how they told her to think. However, their reporting made her a foaming at the mouth Bernie Sanders hater.
Right. Indeed. All right. Let's go to our second main segment of the evening. This is a fun one, folks. So Lance from the Serfs, who I would always call the toothpaste man because I think he looks like toothpaste. But actually, in close-up, he looks less like toothpaste than he does on the Leftist Mafia show, so I'll have to give him that. But he appeared on Tim Pool's podcast to hash out several hot-button culture war topics, including abortion and trans rights. There were several different interpretations about how this went from several different people on several different sides. So let's chime in and referee this a bit. Let's see what we have to say. This is first on the abortion topic. Here's Tim Pool versus Lance from the Serfs.
Can we make the argument then that the use of guns on people are allowed?
The use of guns on people are
to end their lives is allowed.
So that's murder. You're describing murder.
So if Colorado, for instance, passes a law saying there is no medical requirement for an abortion, is it wrong to kill the baby?
You're trying to compare murdering someone with a gun to a woman having to make a medical decision that could basically preserve her life.
No. I said not a medical reason. That's what I'm saying.
Should she have the ability to have an abortion for any reason? Yes.
At 9 months.
At 9 months, I would say at 9 months, because it only happens according to the stats based on complete medical necessity. She has a right to do it.
No. Hold on. Colorado legalized abortion up to 9 months with no medical reason required.
Now, that appears to be true, by the way. We researched
looked
that to try and
we were
fact
kind of
check
surprised because I had never heard that.
I had never heard that, and you would think that would be bigger news, actually. But if you go to, I think it's abortionfinder.org, it'll say that in the state of Colorado, you can get an abortion at any stage.
At any stage.
In your
I didn't know that
regardless.
existed anywhere in the country.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. But that is apparently true. So basically, Tim Pool asked him the question. He's asking him a moral question. Should that be legal? And Lance is trying to spin that into a practical question. Well, because it doesn't happen very often, I'm just going to kind of try and blow that off. I don't have to answer it exactly.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
I agree with that decision, yes.
So the baby could survive on its own, and the mother is legally now allowed to just end its life.
She has the right if she wanted to. You're saying so in Colorado, and
it's not a trick question. You're
I know, but I'm asking you because you're the one who brought this up. I don't know what Colorado specific law says. So if you were saying that in Colorado, women have the ability at 9 months to have an abortion for any reason, they could just decide that
elective, yeah.
Okay, I think they should have the right to do that, but the stats show that they're not doing that. But they should have a legal right to do that. Yes, it's their body, it's their choice, of course.
So this is what I disagree on. I think if the baby needs to be removed from the woman, there's no reason to kill it. You know what I mean? Like you could just C-section and then put it up for adoption.
But I'm telling you that doesn't happen.
But it does. But hold on.
Like you might be able to bring up anecdotes, but the stats don't say that.
But hold on. But once again, whether or not it happens is not the point of what Tim Pool is asking him. He's asking you a moral question because he's trying to pin you down on what your moral judgment is. Right. I don't feel it tremendously necessary to say, but in case there are any first-timers here watching, I'm vehemently pro-choice. When it comes to late-term abortion and things like that, look, my personal position on this is like, I'm sure if you watched any sitcom, you'll hear a mother crack a joke to the young kid. They'll say, damn it, I brought you into this world, I can take you out, right? Ha, 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 canned laughter. That's more or less my view on it, if I'm being completely honest, right? However,
and now Child Services is coming for your kids, Keaton. Nice work. Nice work. They'll be there tomorrow.
Yeah. When it comes to abortion, I would say not once they're out. That was an exaggeration.
Oh, once they're out. Okay.
A humorous exaggeration on my part.
Philip K. Dick actually did a short
I know
story
he did a story on this. Yeah.
About you could basically have your child killed up until 13.
Yeah, he did a story about that. Well, that was like the South Park episode where Eric Cartman's mother tries to have him aborted. She goes into the doctor. She says, I'd like to have an abortion. He says, okay, how far along are you, ma'am? She says, well, he's 10 years old. So look, I mean, I'm not philosophically all that opposed to that. However, as a representative of the left, to what limited capacity I am, to the extent that I speak publicly about this, I would fully admit that my view on that is probably a very fringe view. I would not expect most people to be with me on that, and I certainly would not expect laws to be passed that reflect that judgment. And so, politically speaking, I would say, yeah, I mean, in the 9th month, unless it is a medical necessity to abort the pregnancy, you should try to keep the baby alive as much as possible. Now, that doesn't mean keeping it inside the mother if the mother needs it out, but as Tim Pool said, a baby can survive a birth past 8 months or at 8 months. And so why not try to keep it alive if possible? And so what Tim Pool did here to the toothpaste boy is what a lot of conservatives, and Tim Pool, I know he is a self-described centrist and things like that, and he is pro-choice generally speaking, as he does explain in this interview. He does what a lot of conservatives are able to effectively do to liberals and even leftists, is they exploit the fact that liberals and leftists tend to be beholden to their wokest core audience, and they know that they cannot say anything that would in any way compromise their status as a quote-unquote ally. And knowing that, they're able to go after them and pin them down in this way, because what is Lance going to do? Lance always has to fall back on, well, it's their body, their choice, because if you stray from that at all, he's going to lose subscribers. Now, here at the DueDissidence podcast, we're not afraid to lose subscribers over things like that, so we can be more honest and trust. Right, exactly. And trust that most of you will stay, and if some of you leave, well, that's too bad. Thanks for watching, right? But these guys are not willing to take those chances, and the Tim Pools know that, which is why they're able to so effectively nail them down. Tim Pool is not a mastermind debate artist, but he's able to make mincemeat of this fucking guy, because this guy is not willing to take any stance that he thinks will undermine his ally status with the woke core audience of his.
Yeah, and speaking of losing subscribers, so my view on this, I'm pro-life. No, I'm kidding. I feel it is not up to the state to make these decisions for women on the whole. I have always felt the argument that it's not a life is sophistry. I've always felt that what you're really saying is the mother has a right to take that life because it's in her body, but you can't say that because it's hard to put that on a poster, right?
Well, that's what I said. It's not a politically viable opinion, really. Like, I don't expect that to be a political viable opinion.
It was interesting. In soon to be friend of the show's book, Norm Finkelstein, he actually gets into this. He talks about the Roe v. Wade decision and the fact that the court, on the one hand, took pains in the decision to say that they were not taking a position on when life begins. But then Norm, I hope I can call him Norm, he goes on to very rationally argue, well, but if you decide, as they did, that abortion limitations can start to be imposed once the baby is viable outside of the body, well, you are taking a position on when life begins. Otherwise, why are you choosing that demarcation point rather than another? You may say you're not taking a position, but clearly you're taking a position on when it becomes murder, right? When it's no longer morally justifiable to do it. I have always felt that line was kind of arbitrary. What, it's a life now, but it's not a life now? What about now? What about now? Right. What about now? I've always felt that was an argument they had to make to get the right to abortion, because you could just never get it if you say, yes, it is taking a life, and we have a right to do that because it's in our body, right? Like, that's a very hard moral argument to make. So I don't fault people for taking that argument, but I never bought it. Now, what they're arguing here, late-term abortion, I mean, that honestly, because nobody makes this argument, I haven't even really wrestled with this much.
Right.
You know, like, because it's so right. I mean,
well, it's so rare, and that's
the
what
left would never say that this should be permitted.
Right.
Like, I just haven't had people come to me and say this should be allowed.
Well, right.
That's why I didn't know there was a state it was allowed in. I assumed it wasn't allowed anywhere.
Yeah, no, as did I. But that's why he gets backed into a corner so easily here. So let's see how they keep going.
Hold on. Like, why allow it to happen? I just don't understand. Are you arguing? Wait, hold on. Are you arguing you oppose it And you think it's morally wrong, but you think it should be legal?
I think that women should have the right to decide what they do and have bodily autonomy over their own bodies.
We're not talking about her body. We're talking
It
about...
is her body.
We're
Of course
talking
it is. At 9 months, even if it's still inside her, it's still her body. Even if it's a viable
But we're
baby, it's
talking
still her
about the
body.
removal of the baby, yes?
The forceful removal of the baby, or...
Forceful.
So she chooses to have that. She
The
should have the
woman
right.
says the baby must be removed from my body. Why kill the baby if they're removing it?
I don't think they should do that. I would if
But you think it
they
should be
asked
legal?
me, Lance, should I do this? I would say no, but she should have a right. Yes, of course. It's her body still. That doesn't
listen.
stop.
So, like, the woman is pregnant, the baby is viable and capable of surviving on its own.
Sure.
And she says before it breaches oxygen, kill it. Do you think that should be allowed?
This is, again, the baby guillotines. This is why I brought that up. But what a weird scenario. This doesn't happen. This is not the real world.
But it does.
When?
And if the argument is that it doesn't happen enough for you to care, that's fine. You're allowed to believe that.
Sure.
What I don't know.
Yeah, see, I mean, that was actually a smart move that he said there, because he pinned down his argument very, very well. He says, look, if you're saying this doesn't happen enough for you to care about it, then just say that. But that's not what you're saying. You're trying to answer the question without actually answering it. And like I said, this is part of how right-wingers are able to pin the left down, not just on an issue like this, but, on an issue of, like, the book banning, right? So they'll ban some books, and you say, well, I don't think you should ban books. They say, well, do you think that they should allow pictures of cocksucking at a school library? Or, is that what you want? And then, you try to be nuanced from there, because the question is, and this is what I think Lance is trying to communicate, but just doing an absolutely terrible job of it, is it's a question of where and when and how the state should intervene in such a matter. Like, take the Colorado law, for example. Like, I don't think past 8 months, right? You're talking about super late term where the baby can be removed alive just as easily as it can be removed dead.
Right.
I don't think in that scenario, if I were making the laws, that you should be allowed to remove that baby dead unless some freaky medical thing happens where you have to. But what I would say...
He boxed him into making the argument that the woman should have the right to decide whether you kill it before you remove it or not. And that is a terrible thing to argue.
Yeah, it's a really, really tough thing to argue. Now, if you want to be nuanced, if you want to try and preserve your woke cred, right? And this is something that I probably would argue. Again, this is not something I thought that much about prior to seeing this clip, because I didn't know that this was a thing either. One thing I would argue is that if the state of Colorado deems that permissible, I don't think the federal government should intervene to say, well, no, it's not. Right? Like, if the people of Colorado vote for politicians who enact that law, do I think the federal government should intervene and say, well, no, actually, late-term abortion is illegal in all 50 states, and so we are overriding this law? Like, no, I probably don't think you should go.
I mean, if you take that position, you really have no defense against conservatives who say, and if this state votes to make it illegal, the federal government should not step in.
Yeah, well, that's the problem.
I mean, now you're making a states' rights argument.
Right. Exactly. And yeah, that is the problem with that argument. Yep. All right, let's go.
Understand is it seems like your position is a rather shocked position where you recognize there is something inherently wrong with taking the life of a baby that could survive on its own, but you're also taking the tribal position of women should be allowed to do it anyway.
No. If you were to ask me, Tim, hey, Lance, do you think it's a good idea if this woman who's 9 months pregnant, suddenly she got bored with the pregnancy, she doesn't want to have it anymore?
The question is not whether you think it's a good idea. The question is whether you think it should be allowed.
Right.
Baby's viable. Do you think that's a good thing to do? I would be like, no, of course not.
Then why should it be allowed?
Because it's still her right. It's still her body.
But
bodily autonomy doesn't stop at my morality. Tim, it's not my choice.
Okay, so that was one clip.
Right. So he's giving them the party line in a context where it's absolutely absurd. It's not even really good for the pro-choice cause to be arguing this, because this is exactly what conservatives use to argue against abortion altogether. Look at what these people believe.
Right, exactly.
They believe the woman should be able to murder the baby in the 9th month on a whim.
Right.
Exactly. I mean, that is what you're arguing, right? Because Tim didn't argue. He said, yes, I believe she should be able to not be pregnant anymore at any stage of the pregnancy. But does that give her the right to decide the baby should not be removed alive?
Right.
And to make the argument, yes, that's just not a morally tenable argument. You can't make that argument to people. I mean, it's that they could play that clip to make abortion illegal. Like that doesn't help.
Right, exactly. All right, we're going to go to a second clip in just a second. But before we do that, I just do want to take some super chats since it's been a while since we checked in. I missed this one earlier, Meteor Dreams. I'm sorry about that. But the Burger King looked better than King Charles. Franklin Warsham. Oh, the Chevy Nova. That's right. We got to that one. I just missed Meteor Dreams. Sorry about that. Okay, we'll knock some of these out real quick here. Alexander Meta Pistrito, thank you for the $5 and thanks for being here. I don't know if I've seen you here before. Premier Biden, very popular here at Beijing. Please vote for him again. Good one, Alexander. Mosaic for the $5. Thank you. Dumbest left YouTube rankings. All right. Kyle Kuklinski, Hassan Piker, the Serfs, Emma Vigeland, and the Vanguard. Honorable mentions, everyone at TYT. That's not a bad list. I haven't watched enough of the Serfs to know them. I don't really know them at all. I just know him from the leftist mafia.
I was watching Emma Vigeland's take on the Tim Pool Lance segment, and God, it was so dumb. It was so dumb.
Well, the headline of their take was something like Tim Pool tries to wiggle out of being a conservative. Right? It was a completely
like
tribal
that
argument.
matters.
Like they didn't address the substance of it in the headline. At least I didn't bother watching the video. But their argument going in was, see, this guy's not one of us, right? Not actually curious about what he's saying. They are just interested in, is he part of our tribe or not? And we're going to prove to you that he's not. And therefore you shouldn't like him.
Well, I'm really watching the Tim Pool segment and watching the Majority Report segment. What struck me was, as much as they disagreed with Lance, they treated him with respect throughout. Like, we're going to play where Tim gave him pushback, but it was appropriate pushback because of the shit that he was pulling. He tried to pull kind of a debate tactic that's very typical of liberals. We'll get into it. But you watch the way, can you imagine if you had Tim Pool on the Majority Report, the way he would be treated? Can you imagine if you put him on the Young Turks, the way he would be treated? You know what? I think we have to. I'm just so angry about what you're saying right now.
Right. Exactly. All right. This wasn't a super chat, but I thought this was funny because we're talking about losing subs. Bad Cookie says, DueDissidence is the only channel that celebrates milestone subs multiple times. Congrats on 9K subs again. Good one. Yeah, we make sure we have enough over the threshold before we announce it so that we avoid that embarrassment. Right, so like when we got to 5,000, we're like, maybe we should do a video now. We're like, no, let's wait till we get to 5,020 so that when we lose some, we don't dip under it and have that video be embarrassing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Jack Carolyn, thanks for the $5. Pardon me. Sleep deprived on German time here. I stayed up for Uncle Norm Chutzpah Finkelstein, definitely in my list of top 5 Jews. Well, great. When's he rescheduled for? Well, we're sorry, Jack, that we let you down in that way. Although you're a patron, we announced on the Patreon email earlier today that he wouldn't be here. But he's rescheduled for the 16th, Tuesday, May 16th.
By that time, we will be able to read that entire book.
Exactly.
So we're going to give him a whole night. We were originally just going to give him an hour. So you're going to wait longer, but it's going to be a much more in-depth interview.
Yes, we think it'll be worth it. All right. So let's cut back into our segment here. With regards to bodily autonomy, they were able to nail Lance down pretty well here in this next minute segment here, which was also making the rounds on Twitter. So let's give this a play.
To believe that the moment after the child is outside of the birth canal, that they are now endowed with human rights.
Yes.
However, when they are inside of the mother, literally anything you do to them is acceptable because they're inside of the mother.
Oh, no, I don't think anything is acceptable, but I think the mother should still have the choice, ultimate authority over what happens to her body.
But there's a child inside of her body.
Hold on.
Not
what about
Yes.
meth?
Like, should she be allowed to do meth?
Yeah.
I think if someone is doing meth while they're pregnant, that it is completely acceptable for something like, I don't know what the name of the service is in the United States.
Child services?
I guess ECFS would be...
Oh, it's her body, though.
Yeah, it's her body.
If she wants to do meth, what's the big deal?
The big deal is that she's intentionally trying to kill a child.
Hold on there a minute.
Yeah, and I see where we're going.
How could you walk into that? How could you walk into that?
Yeah.
I mean, you do this for a living, right? I mean, I understand certain debates don't go well. You know, I understand everybody makes mistakes on the air, right? How do you walk into that trap? Which
Like
you should have been able to see coming 3 steps ahead. You should have been able, as soon as he said, what about meth? You should have been able to see, okay, I know where he's going with this. Do you have a right to act recklessly in a way that endangers the baby? Right? Like you should, how could you not see that move coming?
Well, I think he saw it coming, but given the premises of his argument, what would he have said? Like, how could you avoid it without contradicting himself as he did? Right? I mean, and to go so far as to say, get child protective services. So you're saying you should get the government to restrain her from injuring the baby that way. But if she said she wanted an abortion, then that would be okay. That's just not logical. It's not consistent.
Right. At 8 months, you're late in the term. Right.
Right. You cannot defend that position. So that's why I'm saying I'm sure he did kind of see it coming and he walked right into it because what else was he going to do? He's already falling by that time. It's too late to recover now. He already made the argument.
Right. It is tough to change.
I don't understand what you're saying. It's her body.
It's her body.
If she wants to do meth, what's the problem?
Well, first off, doing meth is illegal, period. Doesn't matter if...
All right, well, there you go. And then he makes the point, well, what about drinking, right? I mean, he was checkmated there. All right, we're going to do one more segment of this. This was on a different issue. This was on the trans issue, obviously. Russell, do you want to set up what they're talking about here? They're talking about Jazz Jennings a bit. Do you want to give some background to some of our audience who might not know this context?
Okay, so Jazz Jennings was given puberty blockers at a very young age. I think.
And how old is she now, more or less? About
22, I think, or
Okay.
20, maybe 20.
Okay.
And I think she was 11 when they put her on puberty blockers. Now, if you look at the parents, you know, she has a reality show and has basically grown up in front of the camera. They claim that she knew she was trans when she was 4 years old. Now, if you watch some of the reality show with the parents, there is no doubt in my mind that her mother is like the stage mother from hell who found a situation to exploit here. Now, does that mean Jazz Jennings isn't trans? I don't know. I don't know Jazz Jennings. I know if I had a trans child, I wouldn't parade them around like a circus animal in front of the cameras like that. The fact that that is what she chose to do with her child, I think says a lot about her and the father. There's a clip that's been making the rounds quite a lot lately because now Jazz is at Harvard and she's not dilating. And the mother, you know, was sitting there with other mothers saying, I wake her up in the middle of the night with a wand and I say, if you don't dilate, I'll wring your neck, which doesn't really sound like she's making her own choices, especially given that she's over 18. Now, when you put somebody on puberty blockers at that age, when you put a male on puberty blockers at that age, medically, chances are they're never going to experience an orgasm because the gonads are never going to develop properly. What you wind up with is a micro penis. So when they actually did the bottom surgery on Jazz Jennings, there have been a lot of complications and she's needed multiple surgeries because there wasn't enough there to really make it out of. And I honestly, with this reality show, I don't know why they feel that it's an argument for it rather than against it, because they literally showed the doctors in the operating room not knowing what to do because they had never encountered anything like this before. Like they're trying to figure it out mid-surgery, what to do in a situation like this where the person's been on puberty blockers from such an early age that there's nothing to make this out of. So Tim is saying he's kind of turning in this segment. He talks about Jazz Jennings not being able to experience sexual pleasure and how horrible that is. And he's kind of flipping the transgenocide thing on its head by arguing, I think you're committing a genocide because you're sterilizing these people. When you put them on puberty blockers and you put them on hormone replacement therapy, chances are they're going to wind up sterile. So how is that okay to sterilize all of these trans people?
All right, let's take a listen.
While removing these people's ability to reproduce, and if they're at a young age and they haven't had the ability, like for instance, Jazz Jennings can never have kids. Jazz Jennings also, and this probably part of your studies, can't actually feel any sexual feeling of any kind.
Do you have any idea how weird this sounds right now? Like, why are you obsessing with a stranger's genital pleasure? That's so weird. That's so bizarre.
That was very weird yourself.
You guys are all weird.
No. So I'm talking about adults who engage in activities, which is a large portion of the global economy, whether you like it or not. Sex sells, they say. And when I
mean, it's not just that it sells. I see what he was going for there. But actually, the NIH has written several reports, and there are several global medical establishments who have declared sexual pleasure a human right. A human need and a human right. So the fact that a decision was made that deprived her of this, certainly before she was of age, I mean, that is worth bringing up. I don't think there's anything strange about bringing that up or weird about bringing it up. Nobody's obsessing. Like, look, sexual feelings are a need just like any other human need, right? Like, humans have all kinds of needs. Why is it taboo to bring up this human need? How woke is that, Lance? That's a very unwoke. You would say, whoa, why are you going there? Why are you obsessing over that? What if she couldn't fulfill some other human need? Taste, right? What if she had hormones given to her that desensitize all of her taste buds and she could never taste food? And wasn't that a bad thing to do to a person who was under 18? Would you say, well, that's weird. Why would you obsess over whether someone could taste food or not? No, there's nothing weird about bringing that up. Sexual pleasure, same exact thing. It's just another human need, just like tasting food is, right? So yeah, there's nothing bizarre about bringing that up. This is another situation where I think Lance, because the first abortion segment didn't go too well, I think he sensed that he was being led into another trap, and so he tried to, at this time, sort of deflect early enough on to the point where he could just avoid having the conversation, which, look, I don't think Tim is necessarily the best of his breed when it comes to debate, but he's certainly a pro, and he's certainly enough of a pro that he wasn't going to let him wiggle out of it, and he didn't.
Well, and this is a typical lib tactic. It's happened to me sometimes when you debate them on this. They like to use that in various contexts to try throw the ick on you and your argument, right? So a lot of times, if you're debating them on trans issues, they'll try to go, why are you so concerned about other people's genitals, right? They'll try to make it perverse, like it's a morbid interest, particularly with Jazz Jennings. Jesus Christ, because of her sick fucking psycho parents, she's grown up in front of a camera talking about this. Right. On her reality show, they show her having her post-op vagina examined on TV.
Right.
So that's not appropriate to talk about. I mean, you're talking about the most visible, prominent, Truman showed trans person in history. Of course, it's an appropriate subject. But yes, this is something they'll try to do to avoid having to really debate these things on their own terms. Well, why are you so interested in somebody else's genitals? Like, but he doesn't have it, and he handles it well.
Say this person will never have this ability. You go, how weird is that?
It's weird for you to fixate on a stranger's genital pleasure. That's strange. That's so bizarre.
Well, she's public about. Weird to fixate on a person's lack of taste. If a person couldn't taste food, and we say, hey, that was weird that you took away their ability to taste food when they were so young, would you think it was weird or awkward that we brought that up? No. Well, sexual pleasure is the same exact thing. It's just another need. Like, Lance is the one who's being like puritanical about this. And it's obviously very disingenuous because in another context, he'd be totally comfortable talking about these issues.
Of course. I mean, if you were talking about it in a positive way.
Right, exactly.
But see, you're not making an argument right now, is my point.
I'm not. I'm saying it's weird. It's not an argument. Yeah, that's an observation.
So you're trying to make an appeal to emotion.
To try and dissuade you from engaging me in the argument because I'm not going to win it.
Right. He's trying to rule the whole conversation out of bounds.
I'm warning you, I'm going to try to make you look like a perv if you push me on this. So just quit now. Right.
That's well, I mean, on the on Emma Viglin's segment, they pushed this all the way to try to make it look like he had the better of him, which, nobody watching this could think that. You know what? All these people who talk about this, they're all perverts with a prurient interest. Listen, man, I don't think there are 6 people who can hear the story of Jazz Jennings and get a prurient interest rather than a lot of sympathy for what she has gone through in these surgeries. I don't think it's a prurient interest on anyone's part, certainly not Tim's part. But that's what they like to do to avoid, because how do you defend that? How do you really defend that? How do you really defend taking away this person's capacity for sexual pleasure and reproduction at 12?
Right,
You
exactly.
can't.
When
You
you don't even really know what that is at 12. You don't really
Of
know what you're
course.
missing out on.
And that's the point that he makes. Like, you don't even understand what you're giving up at that point. So how do you decide that?
Right, exactly. Alrighty.
And an appeal to
No,
shame.
I'm just giving you my genuine thought when you say something like that. Like,
well,
why
that it was a really fucking pathetic attempt at trying to make an argument.
Why should we talk about that? Why should we discuss whether or not she has genital feeling? That's not important. It's not. It's none of my business.
So let's focus then on the sterilizing of the individual. Are you okay with that?
Who's sterilizing people?
Jazz Jennings is sterile.
Why are we going back to Jazz Jennings? I don't
Jennings
know
is
anything
famous.
about her.
Because Jazz is a famous individual on cable television.
So if she is sterile for whatever reason, what does that have to do with me? Why does that concern?
Not for whatever reason. For the for the
Yeah.
reason that you're debating.
He just
now.
woke up one day.
Yeah, right. It's not for whatever reason. Right.
I
exactly.
mean, that's when you look at the argument. This is where you can tell they know they're wrong. They know they're wrong. Look at how look at all he can do is try to make the question perverse and to kind of deflect what they're actually talking about. Yeah, they happen to be sterile.
Right.
You know, it's not for me to ask these kinds of questions. Okay, so who is it for to ask these kinds of questions then? We're talking about children.
Right. You're talking about minors. Right.
Right. We're not talking about grown-ups. I mean, I yes, there are some very extreme people who believe that adults shouldn't have that choice, but you know what? That's a minority. Even Charlie Kirk, who's a religious nut, when he was debating Buck, conceded, yes, adults should have that right.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, why should I pass legislation?
The sterilization of teenagers.
This is such a weird way to frame this. Like,
you are removing teenagers' ability.
It's not at all
It's
a
a
weird
fact.
way to frame it.
Right.
How is it a weird way to frame it?
Right. He's talking about the medical and biological reality of choosing to do this to teenagers.
And this is the political question. This is the political question that you're trying to settle here. What is it a weird way to frame it?
Right.
It just makes absolutely zero sense.
To have
whatsoever.
children.
I'm not doing anything. I'm not a doctor, Tim.
You
I don't have the
support
ability
it,
to do this.
right?
I support people having access to health care. Of course. Why would I want to prevent that just because some people have bigotry towards them?
Let's try.
That's all we're talking about. Access to health care. Right? It's like if you have the flu, right? It's access to health care. There's absolutely nothing here other than access to health care that we're talking about. This tells you they have no argument. If you confront them with something like this, what have we had so far? You're a perv. Somehow this person got sterilized and it's none of my business. And then falling back on, some kind of vague Medicare for all claim.
Right.
Try again. You seem scared of this. Do you believe that parents and doctors should have the ability to remove the ability of a child for future reproduction?
They should have the ability to give them access to health care. Of course they should.
So why do you keep saying
you're implying that every
that's a very
single gender
political
affirming
answer.
care
That's
results
a
in
politician.
sterilization.
I didn't say
That is not true at all.
I said the removal
There's
of
also
the-
people who are trans that never get bottom surgery.
You seem very scared of this. It's scaring you.
How am I afraid to?
Because you keep deflecting when I ask you. So Jazz Jennings is a specific
Deflecting.
example. Let's try this. Let's
Tim,
slow down and go one point at a time.
You
right?
think I'm deflecting because I don't want to keep talking about someone's genital pleasure who's a stranger? I'm saying it shouldn't concern you. It shouldn't concern anyone, Tim.
Your appeal to emotion is not going to work on me. I'm asking you a science.
I know I can appeal to your emotion.
I'm trying to.
All right, and then it went on.
Yeah.
So there you have it.
Yeah, I watched the whole thing for myself because conservatives clipped it and liberals clipped it, and I knew, they would clip it deceptively. So I watched the whole thing for myself. Yeah, Tim Pool destroyed him in that entire debate on every front. The only thing I thought was a little weak, probably because as viewers of the show know, I have a certain expertise in this area. Tim could have come better prepared on the debate about detransitioners and countries that have banned these procedures based on analysis of the data. He could have been better prepared on that score because Lance was arguing that these Nordic countries banned these procedures for minors because of political pressures. And it's actually Sweden, the first country that allowed people to legally change their sex. Their board of scientists made that decision, not Parliament. Parliament didn't do it. So Tim could have been better prepared. But other than that, yeah, they destroyed him. And something else that was interesting, because I've never watched Tim Pool. I've seen little clips, but I never watched him for more than like 10 minutes. You know, man, it was a very interesting and civil conversation. And for Lance too. I mean, other than he was a little bit of a dick there, other than that, he was a good sport. You know, I mean, he, you know, and they even said afterwards that he was very polite. Everybody was very polite to everyone. That kind of, you know, we're going to build on this theme a little bit. You know, we keep saying on the show, going back to the cowbell experience, you know, a lot of these people are a lot more persuadable than a lot of people who call themselves left, right? Like I feel like watching Tim Pool's crowd. Tim Pool actually on that episode said he's for Medicare for all, right? So I don't know what his politics are in general, but seemed a lot less unreasonable than what I hear on the Majority Report, than what I hear on the Young Turks. Like they seem much more like people you can deal with. And again, if the positions were reversed and Tim were on any of their shows, I don't think they would have been treated with the courtesy that Lance was.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, it was just a pretty awful job. You know, I mean, he was asked at one point if he considers himself, you know, a representative of the left. And thankfully, Lance said no, because if he were, it was certainly not a good look, you know. But, you know, I thought he struck me as someone who, I mean, look, I don't know how often he debates people. I think they debate a decent amount. But look, I mean, that is a function of a certain siloed media space. It's a function of people just being unwilling to challenge their own audiences. If they feel like their own audiences give them zero leeway, then they just have to adhere to a narrow set of talking points. And I'm not saying that Lance doesn't believe them himself. I'm not saying he's being disingenuous. I think one thing feeds the other, right? If you know you're only allowed to have one take on each issue, right? There's only one true take you're allowed to have without the patrons fleeing or the subscribers fleeing, then you are going to adjust your own wiring to the point where you are responding to input in a way that furthers your own goals. And I think what we saw there was a function of that.
Yeah. And watching this is a good example of, I think, what we've both been talking about. I focus in on this a little bit more. These people are very bad for us. They are very bad for our cause, because when we go out and we try to persuade people on our economics, as soon as they hear socialism, they don't realize we're different people from the cowbell people. They think we're the same people. Now, as some of you probably know, I watch a lot of, you know, geek pop culture stuff and commentary. So I was watching the Nerdrotic crew commenting on the Indiana Jones trailer and just, you know, absolutely tearing it apart. But the conversation that they had said a lot to me about everything that I'm saying about how these people are probably persuadable, but they associate the left with this very condescending kind of Hollywood clique that has kind of made it their mission to destroy everything that these nerds care about, right? So they won't even listen. So we have a clip of that.
Yeah, and the link to this full video is in the description. So a shout out to the Nerdrotic crew. If you're into this kind of stuff, they do it pretty well. So go check them out. Here it is.
Then you stole it.
And then I stole it. It's called capitalism.
All right. Oops, sorry. I didn't mean to do that. I meant to pause it. But that was a portion of the Indiana Jones trailer where it's a little fast and it cuts in a bit sort of quickly there. But I stole it, no, you stole it, then I stole it. That's called capitalism. So a sort of, dig at capitalism there from the studio that's putting out Indiana Jones 5. Yeah, real pinkos
5
over there making a 5th Indiana Jones movie. Not for the money.
Yes.
Not for the money. No. But there was that thing. Okay, sorry. I meant to pause it. I ended up...
Piss off, you
Economic
vandal,
in these trades.
bloody activist.
Capitalism. That's not capitalism.
Batman's
you dumbass.
fascist.
Phoebe Waller-Bridge is fucking poison.
Hate it.
Poison.
What was the one in Ant-Man 3?
It's a nice gig. We should do this. We should just find
We
13 friends
should.
of ours to comment on movie trailers. We could grow the channel a lot faster.
Lot easier than this. Lot less risk of getting shot outside my building.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly. All right. So they're upset with that dig at capitalism there in the trailer.
Socialism?
Oh, yeah, socialism.
Socialism's a bit of a charged
Just need a
word.
libertarian, man. Socialism is good. Capitalism is bad. And Batman is a fascist. All right?
Yeah.
Now tell me they're just throwaway lines and not fucking
right.
political
Okay, now they start going into identity politics a little bit later in this video, which we will show. But the interesting thing that I find, because Russell's main point is that to people who are only marginally interested in politics, whose main passion is obviously movies and pop culture and things like that, because the left is so easily associated with the wokesters like the Lances and, Majority Report and things like that, they have this averse reaction to socialism, which might be a sort of stand-in for their averse reaction to the more cultural stances.
Exactly.
Right? But beyond that, it's interesting how it's so all one thing now that
they're for it, so I'm against it.
Well, but the thing is, it's all...
And they're not really for it, but they don't realize that.
Well, that's the thing that gets me about this, is that they seem to be reacting as if the creative team behind Indiana Jones 5 is anti-capitalist.
Yes, exactly. Because they think that.
Right,
They think that.
Right.
Because they think these same people who hate Indiana Jones with a passion, who hate the fans of Indiana Jones with a passion, and so are going to handle the character in this very deconstructed way. They think these people are socialists because they'll throw lines like that into the screenplay. They'll throw like fashionable nods at anti-capitalist sentiments into the screenplay, or stuff about Batman being a fascist, which I wrote a whole article about that.
Right.
But I didn't write it in this very condescending way. See, most of these people liked the Joker. They liked it a lot. They like the message of it. What they don't like is these screenwriters who came out of Brown throwing in a line about Batman being a fascist, because they know that the intention behind that is, you guys go fuck yourself.
Right.
We're going to go find a new fan base. We don't want you anymore.
Exactly. Whereas the new Joker movie made pretty much that exact point without articulating it.
Right.
It
And these people loved it.
And they loved it. Right. All right, let's let them keep going.
How come all these throwaway lines end up in the fucking marketing of the trailer, where every second is gone over with a fine-tooth comb? That's bullshit.
This film can piss off. I can't believe how
They should have had Bernie narrate the
angry
trailer.
it's making me.
Coming this Memorial Day.
All you had to do is
Harrison Ford.
Indiana Jones fighting Nazis. We know Nazis are bad guys. You don't have to have any
We need
commentary on that.
we need another brunette, white, British woman for diversity. Okay.
Quarter Black, Garrett, you are being very toxic. There is no way a simple movie with a simple story based on something that a lot of people love will work in today's Hollywood.
Masculinity,
There's no way that would work.
Masculinity doesn't sell anymore, okay? Except for John.
So
Wick
now
and
they go
Top
into
Gun.
so they started out with the socialism critique, and then they very quickly and perhaps unconsciously even slid into the identity politics.
Slid right into the identity politics. That's what was fascinating about this clip to me. It illustrates everything I've been talking about, because these people, they love the Joker, which had this very anti-establishment, anti-authority message.
And anti-capitalist message, by
and
the
a
way.
very anti-capitalist message. This is what I'm saying. You can persuade these people, and they represent a very large cohort, which we will get into. And I would argue that you cannot build a political movement without convincing these people.
Right. No, I think you're right. All right, here we go.
Does not work. The hero's journey does not work. There's no way a simple story with simple storytelling based on fan service would work in today's Hollywood. It wouldn't work. No way.
Would not be a movie of that.
There would not be. There would not be a movie that's dominating the box office like that. Wouldn't happen. No. So
Nope. Not
we have to have
close.
messages.
Not several
in anti-capitalism messaging. That's right.
And then they go right back in seamlessly into the capitalism versus socialism. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So there is definitely overlap between this kind of film and pop culture commentary and honestly, the Tim Pool. Like, I think that's part of what made it click for me. Like, you know what? There are a lot of people like that out there,
of course,
who are very anti-establishment, who are very anti-authority. It would not be hard to make the argument to them, well, you don't think that these insurance companies and these pharmaceutical companies are all part of that system that you hate? So maybe actually you're anti-capitalism, right? Maybe actually you are on the wrong side of those issues. Now, I know some people will say, well, you know what? These are all white men. These are all white people. And why are we catering to them? Well, I'm gonna show you why. I'm going to show you why. As much as you may be hearing about, we need a new producer over here, man. Tusker.
It's a little bit, it's funny. I don't know if that was me hitting the wrong button or because right before we went on the show, our faces came on the screen, which I didn't hit that button. So I don't know if StreamYard's being a little jumpy, but here, let me try this again.
It's weird because we had chats coming up on the screen last week that I know that
we didn't touch either.
And you didn't hit.
Right. And then today we had the camera thing. So
we're getting hacked.
Yeah.
We're getting hacked. Okay, so as much as you've heard about the emerging non-white majority, okay, so first of all, white people have fallen back to, I think, 58%-ish of the population. But look at the numbers they vote in. 70.9% of voters are white.
The electorate is bougier, which means it's going to be whiter, right?
30% of the American population are white men. I have not been able to find any stats. They might not exist on how many of them are straight white men, but 30% are white men. Now, this is my point. It's not about what you think about white people or white men. I don't give a fuck. Listen, if somebody came to you and said, you know, it would be a great electoral strategy. Let's constantly talk about how much we hate Asians. Would you think that was a good strategy? No, of course you wouldn't, right? Especially we have elections today that are decided at the margins. You need every vote. You don't want to alienate a voting bloc. So you got 70% of voters are white. And you want to have a political movement where you're constantly building your rhetoric around an attack on that cohort as evil, as wrong, and then you want to message out in pop culture constantly that this is what these guys are going off about. every white man on a script, unless it's a legacy character like Indiana Jones, is a villain now. There's no such thing, right? That's like a positive white character. So people like this see that and they associate these elite forces, which is another point. These are usually people who are articulating these points who are from very privileged backgrounds of high education and high earnings, who are espousing these ideas. They come to associate these people with everything left. They don't realize they're not digging into our politics. They don't know about
because they're mostly apolitical people. Right? They only pay attention to this stuff.
They're vaguely political. They're vaguely political in the sense that they're really angry about Star Wars. They're political in
that's
that
what I mean.
sense.
Is they're mostly apolitical.
Right. They're interested in
not their
why
passion.
They're interested in why all the shit they love sucks now. And they've traced it back to these left elitists who make jokes about capitalism in the Indiana Jones movie and try to supplant him with a younger female version of himself, right? So these are the things they're concerned about. But you look at the Tim Pool people as well, and I see people who are persuadable. I see people who are a lot more persuadable than the cowbell people. Hell, I mean, the guy who runs the show already agrees with us on Medicare for all.
Right.
So like I said, I'm not going to step out and talk about that is the only episode of Tim Pool's show I've ever seen. He may have views that I absolutely disagree with, but I saw people who believe in rational debate, who are not going to like lose their shit because they disagree with you. They're actually going to try to argue with you on the basis of reason and rationality. And that is something that is largely lacking on the left. And I wanted to pull up those stats to show, because we're watching Tim Pool's show, and then we're looking at Nerdrotic. Well, they're all white men. Well, I mean, if you would never want to run a political campaign based on the idea that you should alienate Asians as much as possible, well, then you really should not premise your politics on wanting to alienate the largest voting bloc in the country at every opportunity. Like, do you want to win, or do you just want to talk?
Especially, I mean, this just sort of, you asked me to bring this up. Also, the electorate's actually skewing older, which is something that I've pointed out.
This is something people
shows.
don't realize. They think it's getting younger because Gen Z is coming into their own. No, overall, the country is skewing older.
Yeah, this is really disappointing since Marianne's doing so well on TikTok. It's really upsetting that more younger people aren't voting. But what did I say? I said from 2016 to 2018 to 2020 to 2022, this is going to continue in 2024. The revolutionary energy has been filtered out of the electoral process. And what's going to happen as that happens? The electorate's going to skew whiter, yes, and it's going to skew older. Yep. Both of those things are happening.
Yep.
Right? This is why it's easy to mistake popular momentum for electoral momentum, because you're dealing with two different universes. You're dealing with two different sample sets.
Right. I mean, they throughout the smear Bernie bro, and I'm sure there's pretty much no one in our audience that doesn't know the reality was the Bernie supporters were majority people of color and majority female. White men were the smallest part of the Bernie cohort. But yes, now with that cohort gone, of course it's whiter and older, because that whole cohort skewed younger. Those were the younger voters, and they've largely been lost to politics now.
Right. Exactly. All right, let's do our final segment. This is kind of two segments in one. But on Saturday, a gunman killed 8 people at a mall outside of Dallas, Texas, before being killed by the cops. Megyn Kelly was one of a few commentators who advocated an emphasis on mental health as a response to these incidents, claiming that gun control advocates have lost momentum, lost the debate, lost the argument. So I'm going to put up Megyn Kelly's original tweets here. Serious question for gun control advocates. You failed to effect change. Please face it. You can't do it thanks to the Second Amendment. We're all well aware you don't like that fact, but fact it is. What's next? Must we just stay here sad, concerned, lamenting? Could we possibly talk other solutions? Mental health interventions, something real, not the BS we do now. Greater willingness to lock people up with protocols in place for civil liberties who are deemed to be threats, fortification of soft targets, coordination of media response, not to lionize shooters, etc. Now, I just want to state here, because one of the things I tweeted back at her, and I said, this is a genuine question, serious question for you. I'm not trolling. Do you not see a certain inconsistency with opposing gun control on civil liberties grounds, but also advocating to, quote, lock people up who are deemed to be threats? It seems like if you are going to say, well, we can't have stricter gun control because that violates people's civil liberties, you ought to be opposed to that second thing as well. But we'll get to that in a moment here, because somebody replied to her, quite rudely, as happens on Elon Musk's platform quite a bit often. F off. There were 3
That's
mass
why we're
shootings
going to
today.
Mastodon.
Exactly. Almost 200 since January. No, you F off. I'm sick of and tired of nothing changing after mass shootings, because we get mired every time in the damn gun debate. You have lost. It's done. For the love of God, what else can be done? You're ruining any chance at change by not admitting that the gun debate is lost. Now, I hate to be a stickler for this, but the gun debate is actually not lost among people who want certain gun control measures, favorability of gun violence prevention measures. Fox News poll here, background checks, 87%. Enforcing existing gun laws, 81%. Age 21 requirement for gun purchases, 81%. Mental health checks requirements, 80%. Mental health screenings, red flag laws, 80%. 30-day waiting period, 77%. I want to focus on that mental health checks requirement that would be part of a background check. You talk about we need to sort of preemptively, forcibly institutionalize mentally ill people so that they don't fly off the handle. But then you say the gun debate is lost. Well, the gun debate is lost if you put up a straw man that people on the other side of the gun debate are advocating across the board confiscation of everyone's guns, which is not the argument. The argument is exactly that. Exactly that, a mental health check requirement. So if Megyn Kelly is saying, hey, we have to be willing to lock people up who are deemed threats because they're mentally ill, then how could you, in the next tweet you fire off, say that we've lost the gun debate, admitting that what, we shouldn't do the same thing? We shouldn't screen mentally ill people to see if they can get a firearm, but we should take them off the street and put them in a home? Like, it doesn't quite make sense to me. Like, that just is an inconsistency that I think the right has yet to sort of grapple with in a meaningful way. But she does connect. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, not to mention the fact that anytime increased funding for mental health comes up in Congress, they vote it down.
Right. And look, when it comes to the gun debate, I think of it as there are two dials that you can tweak, right? Now, there's the culture of violence dial. How violent is your culture on a scale from 1 to 10? And then how many guns are in circulation, scale of 1 to 10. Now, I would admit...
And we're 10 on both.
Well, that's the thing. We're a 10 on both. Now, I would admit fully that you're better off, you would have probably less gun violence if you had a 1 on the cultural violence meter and a 10 in the circulation of guns meter. You'd be better off in that scenario than the other way around. 10 on the cultural violence, 1 on the presence of guns, right? But given we are a 10 on the cultural violence meter, it absolutely does make a difference where that other dial is placed. If you're a 10 on the cultural violence meter and you're a 5 in the circulation, a number of guns in circulation, you're going to have less gun violence than if you're a 10 on both. A 10 on both. And I don't see how you can advocate, as she does, for the involuntary detainment of mentally ill people, while at the same time saying, well, the gun debate's lost, we can't screen mentally ill people for whether or not they should have a gun. Like, that makes no sense. Right. It just makes absolutely zero sense. I'm not saying it to beat up on Megyn Kelly. I actually think she, every once in a while, makes a fairly good point. But that, to me, is just an inconsistency that they have yet to really try and reconcile. Now, the reason I brought that up is because this issue of involuntary detainment and more proactive, if you want to call them policing measures, I suppose you could, although I wouldn't really concede that, because we're not talking about putting people in prison. You're talking about getting people the help they need so that they are not a threat, not just to others, but not a threat to themselves, obviously. Mentally, by the way, one thing you could do for a mentally ill homeless person is put a roof over their head. Now, you may say this is not the same in both cases, the Texas shooting versus what happened on the New York City subway. But this question of how proactive should the state be in engaging with mentally ill people to make sure that they are not a threat to others or themselves, I think that's a question that applies to both of these horrible things that happened in this last week. Now, in the days following the killing of Jordan Neely on a New York City subway, which we talked about in our last episode, protesters have disrupted train service in the subway. And, I gotta give it to these guys. I mean, it takes some balls to jump on a subway track, which is what they did. So here they are.
What's his name? What's his name? Say his name. What's his name? Say his name. Say his name. Say his name. What's his name? Say his name. Justice for. Justice for. Justice for.
So there you have that.
Yeah.
Now, go ahead. Do you want to introduce this Fong piece?
Okay. So first of all, that tweet had almost universally negative feedback. And I think the response that most resonated for me that I saw was these people would have stepped over Neely on the way to work the day before this happened. And that is absolutely fucking true. That is absolutely true.
Of course.
It's not,
That's true of everybody in New York. Yep.
It's not like you have this great outpouring of care for these people. You don't. This case is being just used, propped up as a political talking point. There's absolutely no nuance to it. And really to demonstrate the hypocrisy of a lot of the people now who are calling out about this. A lot of these were the same exact people, as we started to talk about last week, who fought against Adams trying to take more mentally ill people off the street with involuntary commitment. They fought very strongly against that. Now, if that policy had gone into place, Neely certainly would have been a candidate for that kind of placement. So Lee Fong brought the receipts. Last week, we were just talking about it a little bit, but he really demonstrated it. Here, scroll down some.
Right. First of all, the system failed Jordan Neely. Russell joked to me that he must have seen our video because that's almost to the word exactly what we titled our segment on that when we put that in.
Exactly. His stepfather murdered his mother, and after that, he became increasingly erratic. He was diagnosed with a schizophrenic break. But when they tried to start to, hospitalize people like Neely, who clearly needed help, they all came out against it. A lot of the people who are crying about Neely now were not there for him before. New York City Council member Chi Ase denounced Neely's death as the murder of a mentally ill black man who was killed by a bloodthirsty vigilante. By the way, one of the people involved was actually black himself, one of the three men. Tiffany Caban, another member of the council, she almost won attorney general out in Queens, tweeted, it was one of those like Bernie movement lost causes. Another member of the council tweeted approvingly of a thread that mused that one of the men who restrained Neely was motivated by racialized bias and nationalistic bigotry. Vocal New York, a left-wing criminal justice reform group, claimed in a statement that Neely had been lynched and that the incident showed that a white man can kill a black man and be released without charge. The New York Civil Liberties Union similarly claimed Neely's death was the result of the stigmatization of people of color. Yet just months ago, the NYCLU, Vocal New York, Ase, and Caban were leading the charge against a proposed expansion of government services designed to prevent the type of incident that occurred this week. They protested New York City Mayor Eric Adams's plans to deploy emergency responders and police to, if necessary, involuntarily commit severely mentally ill people who pose a threat to themselves or to the public. Under Adams's plan, the teams of mental health case workers, healthcare professionals, EMTs, and cops would first try to persuade these individuals to voluntarily admit themselves to medical facilities. As a last resort, though, these teams would have the power to coerce mental treatment for people on the streets or in the subways exhibiting extremely erratic or psychotic behavior. When Adams unveiled the plan last November, he immediately faced legal challenges and protests from left-wing politicians and organizations. Ase scorned the measure as simply a ploy for police to just arrest homeless people and throw them into hospitals and jails. Now scroll down some. Before his death, Neely had a warrant for his arrest for allegedly punching a 67-year-old woman as she exited at a subway station in the East Village in 2021. The victim of his assault was reportedly knocked to the ground and suffered a broken nose and orbital bone, according to the New York Daily News. Neely had been arrested over 40 other times, including for punching Philemon Castillo Baltazar, a 64-year-old man, in the face at a Greenwich Village subway station, and for kidnapping a 7-year-old girl. Baltazar, who was attacked by Neely at the Greenwich Village subway station, told reporters this week that the man clearly needed mental health services. He should have been in some rehab center, said Baltazar. Okay, so for anyone who says, well, why do you think his behavior represented a legitimate threat? Well, as Keaton pointed out in the last episode, and I don't know if your view on this has evolved at all, yeah, people start screaming and yelling on the subway all the time because of everything that's being discussed in that article. Why should a man who literally punched a 67-year-old woman in the face, not out of malice, but because of mental health issues, why was he on that subway? Why was he there? He tried to kidnap a 7-year-old girl out of mental health issues. Why was he even on the street? So I think it is reasonable. We can't know, we weren't there. But I can tell you as a New Yorker, if 3 people felt threatened enough to intervene like that, his behavior was probably convincingly threatening enough for it not to simply be ignored, as it would be 99% of the time when somebody is screaming crazy stuff on a subway car. Given the history, I think it's, and given the 3 people, not one, made that decision, I think it's reasonable to believe that, which does not excuse choking this man for 15 minutes.
Well,
that
was always my argument. I mean, I never said that, they should have just turned a blind eye to whatever he was doing and gone on scrolling their phones. I said, it's quite possible that some intervention was necessary. Like I said, when I've ridden the subway in New York, most of the time people leave the guy alone when he's on a tear. Right. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes somebody gets in someone's face, somebody doesn't take that shit, and there's a skirmish, there's a struggle, there's something goes down.
It sounds to me like it was more than that, though. It sounds to me like these people
had
legitimate reason to fear for their safety.
But what I'm saying is, but people have legitimate reasons to fear for their safety. In a lot of these cases, you can argue that constitutes a legitimate threat, and that's why I said some people fight back. Some people take matters into their own hands.
Question as a New Yorker is, what did he do that made 3 people make
but what
that
I'm
decision?
saying is,
I'm
trying to give you yes for an answer here. What I'm saying is, that I understand that there are situations where people feel it necessary to fight back, but there's a lot of room. There's a whole lot of room between doing nothing and choking a guy to death for 15 minutes.
Sure.
So if you want to say you want to fight back,
yes.
well, that's why I told you. I'm trying to give you yes for an answer. You want to fight back, fight back. But there's a way to fight back without a Marine who ought to know when you're endangering a life and when you're not. There's a whole lot of room between not doing anything and choking him to death, and their actions were extreme.
Yes. I don't understand why I didn't put him in an arm lock or something like that, because chokeholds can be very unpredictable in their results.
And once you got a guy in that hold for that long, he's done anyway. He's out. At that point, you can say, listen, are we cool now? You're going to fucking chill now? Can I let you go? And then see where that, you know what I mean? Like, there's
apparently there was somebody on the video apparently saying, yo, you better loosen up. You're going to kill the guy. So,
right, exactly.
Man, there was a discussion. There was enough awareness and there was enough
that's what I said last week.
To start having a discussion like that. So absolutely. But I think a lot of these protesters are full of shit. I think they're the same exact people who, as Fong points out, were saying that we should not expand healthcare services to these people.
Look,
they just had that knee-jerk reaction. And look, I have had a lifelong, not Tom Cruise level skepticism of institutionalization and psychiatric treatment. But I understand where that movement came from, and I've actually always been pretty sympathetic to the idea of, forced institutionalization as being kind of a horrific nightmare. But we're not in the one flew over the cuckoo's nest lobotomy days. we're not in the days of the forced shock treatment.
Oh,
Like,
right.
That was part of what stimulated this deinstitutionalization movement. But I don't think they're ever going to set up a row of shock treatment beds again. Yes, should there absolutely be monitoring so that it's not abused, so we don't see Francis Farmer kind of incidents?
It actually has to be rehabilitation. Yeah.
Right. But, and I'm not even arguing against the idea that they should be out in the community with support services, with a lot of support services. But you have to put money into that. What was done to Neely, as we got into last week, what's been done to the guy who lives in my building, it's a horror, man. And if the people in this building get burned to death, it's going to be the fault of the city because that person should not be there.
Right. I mean, look, when Tusker called into the show a couple weeks ago, I think it was, she talked about how the rise of fascism always happens when there's a weak left. And I think that those protesters represent a weak social democratic left that is not willing to actually take to the streets and actually stick to it and carry out a knockdown, drag out, long-term fight for the things that will actually stop these incidents from happening. This is very, very simple. In the case of New York City, it's about two things. Number one, housing. All right? There needs to be housing for people. New York's got plenty of housing. Half the apartments in Midtown are vacant right now. They're owned, but they're vacant because the landlords are going to hold out until they can find a sucker to give them $3,500 a month. Why would they make them available to poor and working class people when they think it's more profitable not to? That's one thing. We saw a segment we did with Sabby a couple of weeks back. Kathy Hochul's plans for new housing projects up in smoke because the NIMBY libs didn't want them.
Even in Manhattan.
Again, a weak, quote unquote social democratic left. I would argue that's not even a social democratic left. That's just a corporatized neoliberal co-opted left, right? Sure. But even in the best case, these guys in the subway, right? That's the social democratic left for you. Okay, so housing is one thing. Second thing, obvious one, fundamentals, right? Just bare bones. Healthcare, right? You need universal healthcare, including universal, free at the point of service, mental healthcare.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
That's what will actually solve this problem. So if you're on the left, what you need to be doing is actually fighting those battles. What the left is engaged in now is simply symptom management.
It's virtue signaling.
Yeah.
It's virtue signaling. It's much easier to go and use this very charged language around this horrible tragedy. Oh, it's a lynching, it's racism. I don't think this is racially motivated, except insofar as the system is systemically racist. But was this particular incident, can you hone in on this and say this was racially motivated? I don't think so. But it's much easier to go and put yourself on social media making these hysterical statements than it is to actually help someone like this while he's still alive. Okay, you know what? There are a lot of Neelys around the city. Where are the proposals? Where are these people demanding better mental health care for people like Neely?
Mental health care and housing opportunities
and housing
and higher wages. Like, yes, I agree.
Go on the subway tracks and
obviously, it
demand
shouldn't even get to the point in a sane society, in a just and moral society, in a just and moral city, especially one as up its own ass as New York City, right? You shouldn't even have to be talking about forced institutionalization because there should be infrastructure in place to the point where a guy with mental health issues should be able to live a life on their own in their apartments, with a job,
with a lot of
social assistance and support services. Exactly. Yeah. Why can't you build that? I mean, the thing that's so obscene about this, the thing that's just so obscene about this story is if you live in or around New York City or visited recently, you see how much money the city has. You see every block on it's got a restaurant where the entrees start at $35 a plate. Like, you see all the fucking money and all the decadent lifestyles of all these virtue signaling New York Times reading fucking scumbags who, as Russell said, they'll step over a guy like Jordan Neely every day until he dies. And then they'll block the trains for him.
Yep. Exactly. Look, when we did that Riley Gaines segment, another one was popular with a lot of our fans. One thing we never even got into it because there was so much to cover there. But the really crazy one who released that terrifying trans rights are human rights, that one.
Yeah.
If you notice, you see her at the beginning, and the whole time she's doing a performance for her phone. The whole time.
Right.
You fucking bitch! You fucking bitch! That's what it's all about for these people. It's total fucking narcissistic display.
Exactly.
Right? Like if you really cared, see, okay, here's where I'm gonna do I'm old enough to remember. Okay, so when the 80s homeless wave came, all right, so homeless people for a minute there, the left likes to pick mascots. So the way like trans people are the left's mascots now, the homeless people were the mascots in the 80s. Like that was the left's cause, particularly in New York City, because we had whole streets with people living in refrigerator boxes, like all along Lafayette Avenue by the public. You had people living in refrigerator boxes, and you had all of these efforts. And actually, I was an undercover journalist. I lied about my age to get the job. I was 19, and I would go pretend to be homeless, and I would live with them, and I would go and stay in the shelters with them. At that time, there was a big outpouring of money and volunteerism and effort to try to solve the homelessness problem. That's a long time ago. I mean, there's none of that now. Like, people really don't give a shit now. Like at that time, they really did try to do something about it. Now it's not even discussed really here in New York.
Right. Yeah, no, indeed. I mean, that's the culture of the city, and we've talked about this in other shows, how New York City, it's not Seattle, it's not Portland, and not that those cities don't have their virtue signaling social democrat leftists also. Of course they do. But those are progressive towns. New York is not a progressive town. It's a Rockefeller Republican town. It's a town that is so dominated by capital, whether it is real estate or, media or anything else. It's so dominated by capital that capital not only feels inescapable, but it is ever present. Everyone in New York City is thinking about money constantly, because they have to. And so that is how you get a population of, yes, rich fucks who step over homeless people until they need to cry some tears for them to look like they're not the scumbags that they are, sure.
Right.
But it's also how you get a weak left. It's also how you get Hillary Clinton's profile spray painted into the sidewalk of Greenpoint and Williamsburg, where I lived. Like, it's how you get these so-called progressives just get co-opted into neoliberalism, not because a lot of them want to be co-opted into that, but because that's where they live. They live in an environment that is so dominated by capital and money, and that makes competition so necessary that it's just impossible to imagine a world beyond that. And so that's how you get a population of people who, yes, some mean well, some don't. At the end of the day, they all get funneled into the same direction, which is Eric Adams, Mike Bloomberg, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, right? It all goes that same way.
Right. I mean, you make a good point, because back then in the 80s, New York had a different composition.
Right.
I mean, you could still live here cheaply. So you had like legitimately left people here. You had a legitimate radical left. You had a legitimate arts community. Right. So you had enough of a mix here to generate a genuine outpouring of effort to help these people. This is the post Sarah Jessica Parker Sex and the City, New York.
Right.
This is full of people who moved here not to be the Ramones, but to be Sarah Jessica Parker. That's a very different population.
Exactly.
They don't give a fuck. They came here to wear Jimmy Choos. They didn't come here to help the homeless.
100%. But even the ones who don't aspire to that, if you're kicking up 40% of your monthly income to your landlord, there's only so far left you can afford to be. There's only so far left you could imagine yourself being, because you have to. You have to make money constantly. You are producing constantly. You are serving neoliberalism and serving the market, serving capitalism constantly, every second of every day.
Right.
To the point where you can't imagine, like, what is this? Well, you mean something else is possible? Well, we can actually, wait, you mean we can actually build affordable housing where people don't have to live like this? That just seems impossible. It seems impossible in today's New York City.
Well, that's
for
why
good reason. Because it is impossible. Because there is no political will to do it.
Well, that's why I don't know. You can look it up if anyone's interested. David Byrne wrote an article talking about how artists shouldn't move to New York because when he was coming up, he lived in Soho for $50.
Right.
And he said, yeah, man, it stank like chemicals because those are all old warehouses and factories. But it gave me space to create and to develop my ideas and to develop my sound. He said, what are you going to do? You're going to sculpt in your kitchen between your two jobs?
Right.
You can't do that.
No.
Don't go there. So the best people left. They're not sending their best people anymore. The best people are not coming to New York anymore. It's people who want to live in this very wealth porn version of New York. And these are not people who are going to help the homeless. These are people who are very big on virtue signaling their anti-racism.
Right.
But these are not people who are going to do anything meaningful for people like the victim.
Right. Exactly. I mean, I lived in New York for a while. I loved it then. I still love New York. But you don't need New York. And I think that's what a lot of creative people are starting to realize. Like, yeah, we love it, but we don't need it. Like, you can love a pretty girl. If she treats you like shit, you can't stay with her, right? You got to find someone who's going to love you back, right? Or else you're going to be miserable. And that's the way I feel about New York City. And I think a lot of people feel that same way. It's not that I don't love New York City. I do. I always will. But there comes a certain point where it just goes so far in one direction where it can't function the way you idealize it because of that constant pressure that it puts everyone under.
It always had that pressure, but it had compensations.
Right.
And those compensations are gone.
Right. Exactly. All right. So I think that's our show this evening. Let's take some super chats.
Hope you liked our show.
Came in at a crisp 2 hours and 47 minutes tonight. There we go. Brisk. All right, here we go. Laugh. In Europe, we do not allow late-term abortion. This is just common sense. The issue is early-term abortions. That is where poorer women are discriminated against. Sadly, too many Americans are too poor. Yeah, I know there are. I'm not really brushed up on the abortion laws of a lot of European states. I should, though, because it's a topic of interest. I've studied the healthcare systems of European countries fairly extensively, but not that issue. So I will look into that, actually. Thank you.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
If you're doing meth, you're not of sound mind. From Will S. Thanks for the $2. Cool Blue.
What are you trying to say?
Yeah, what are you trying to say? Yeah, exactly. Was that directed at us? I don't know why these super chats are appearing in a different font now. They seem bolder. I don't know what that's about. But nationally, there is not enough support to ban abortion entirely. 2022 special elections in Kansas told us. Yes, state has voted Democrat just once since 1940. Republicans lack the back support in their own party. Yes, they do.
Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing they're going to have to try to figure out how to wriggle out of in order to do well in 2024. They have to find a position.
Oh, yeah, indeed. And so far they have not.
I would say, I mean, I did know that about Europe because that's what a lot of the anti-abortion people point out. Like,
oh, yeah.
It's not a crazy idea. They don't allow it in Europe either.
Right. Cool Blue, you seem pretty hip to a lot of the polling trends and stuff like that. So thank you for those insights. Laugh, thanks for the other 10 pounds there. Thanks, Russell, for bringing up child abuse in the guise of freedom. Any parent doing this to their child is not a caring parent. This is child abuse. Parents are not by definition good. That's in response to Jazz Jennings. You have a response to that?
Well, especially, it tells you everything you need to know that they turned this into a circus act, that they've been parading this poor kid around on TV long before they could really decide what they wanted for themselves. You know, if I had a kid, if you had a trans child, would you do that? Would you make them grow up on TV like that? I mean, that the fact that they made that choice suggests to me that this was strongly encouraged by them and may not have been completely naturally arrived at. I don't know that, but it's evidence for that point of view.
All right. Oops, Sinead, you had 2. I feel like I can breathe when I watch you guys. Well, that's good. Thank you. I'll take that as a compliment. Friends and fam don't want to know what's going on in the world. It gets lonesome. Well, I empathize with that. Love to all in the chat. My old POS phone keyboard won't allow me to regular chat. Interesting. You mean your phone keyboard? You mean your flip phone? Do you have an actual one of those flip phones? Because those have been around forever. That was like 2008, 2009 days. Is that what you're talking about? The phone keyboard?
I just got a BlackBerry.
Devotion. Yeah, the BlackBerry. The BlackBerry, indeed. Abiding 71. Thanks for the 99 cents, my friend. Appreciate it. Matt 22. Thanks for the 199. For the interview, it's Finkelstein, not Steen. Is that true? I thought I've heard him referred to as Steen. But I'll take a look at it. Interesting.
Frankenstein.
Yeah, interesting. So, thank you, though. Good looking out. Lars and Rune, 199 super sticker. Thank you so much. Tusker, $5 confirmed Russell is a gulag kind of guy. Well, I think I was the one who quoted you there by talking about a weak social democratic left, not Russell, but, maybe someday.
She thinks because of the way I talk about the libs, I'm like a Stalinist. I want to do a purge.
Right. You want to get rid of them. All right, Corn Pop. Corn Pop, are you new here? I've seen you make some interesting comments in the chat, but you put a couple bucks on that and you put $5 on this. Your bookshelves are bent over. Bend over is my sin. Interesting. All right. Well, thank you, Corn Pop. Your angle is different tonight. Are you sure you got the your laptop? Are you sure this is your new webcam? The angle is different tonight. In the last shows, we haven't seen any of that side curtain there.
I mean, I guess it's just the way I set up.
Yeah, it's probably just the way you said it. Indeed.
Yeah. No, it's the same one.
Meteor Dreams. Has Russell ever run into Joy Behar in New York City?
No. At this point, though, I think I'm a little more prepared because in New York, sometimes you run into people you want to confront. I've seen Anderson Cooper more than once, and I could have a field day with Anderson Cooper. But the first couple times it happened, I wasn't as confident. I wasn't as seasoned at bothering people on the street.
And he just means asking them questions. Nobody get alarmed.
Oh, yeah.
It's not going to be hostile or anything. But, yeah, just do a man on the street thing.
I will totally. If I see Anderson Cooper again, as long as I am not leading a tour group, I am pulling out my phone and asking him if he feels that a Vanderbilt is really qualified to be commenting on American life.
Right. Exactly. Well, maybe if, I don't know, whoever, Ron DeSantis is the nominee. I don't know. Will he invite Anderson Cooper to his wedding or his kid's confirmation or something like that? They'll make an appearance. Will that be a conflict of interest that they'll have to worry about?
I think it will be. I don't think he'd invite DeSantis though.
I think so. We're gonna have to clip that wedding segment that we did and get that out tomorrow because I don't think anybody else will touch that.
Probably not.
We didn't do it to be mean. We just did it to be.
We weren't even going to talk about it.
No, if the shoe were on the other foot here, I'm sorry. If a major politician in the middle of a campaign season appeared at a major media figure's wedding, we would think,
of course,
that's fucked up.
Of course. But I think you hit it on the head. It's not even that fucked up because it's such a joke of a campaign.
Right, but that proves our point. If they thought she was serious, they wouldn't have invited her to the wedding because they'd be afraid of the optics down the road. Right, exactly.
They're not expecting much of it down the road.
Right, exactly. All right, PMC, the woke left are engaged in palliative politics. Interesting, good word there. Do you know that word, Russell? I don't know that word.
Yeah. Palliative?
What does it mean? Yeah, what does it mean?
It's like... just treating the symptoms and making people more comfortable when they're in pain.
Oh yeah, I just looked it up.
Or dying.
I did a Gavin thing from the Vanguard. Relieving symptoms without dealing with the cause. Interesting. I learned a new word today. Learned from you. And I made money off it too. I got paid $5.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you, PMC.
Don't you wish life were like that?
Yeah, exactly. Agreed with most of what you said. Thanks, Mousetrap. Agreed with most of what you said about Majority Report, but I still watch them because they actually have high-quality interviews with historians about U.S. history. Yeah, I haven't seen any of their interviews in a long time. I haven't seen any of their stuff in quite a long time. I find it just really quite boring.
I mean, I
really
can't speak to that, but I will say, because if you're in this space, you look at other sectors of YouTube, different specialties. A lot of these guys who do history videos are very good. There are a lot of historians on YouTube who just do really interesting ones. I watched one yesterday. I'll look it up. I'll remind me, Keaton. I'll mention it on the next show where to find it. Where the person was making a really good point about when a society falls into decadence, their rulers move into urban centers and away from the land. They're no longer farmers. They're no longer manufacturers. They're no longer dealing with tangible things. And as a result, they get detached from reality. And they also get far removed from the consequences of their decisions. They're kind of living in a bubble of created fantasy. So when they make a policy, it impacts the people, but it doesn't impact them because they're not out there with the people anymore.
Right, indeed. Zach Boyles, thanks for the $1.99. Do it with the tour group, multiple angles. What would you do?
I'll do it on my last day.
Last day. When we start bringing in enough with
When
this
I
show
quit,
that he doesn't have to do it anymore, you can quit. He could do it on his last day, indeed. All right, folks. Well, that's it for the Super Chats. That's our program. Thank you so much for watching. You guys were a great crowd, as always. Please hit that subscribe button if you are not subscribed to the channel. That's very important. Can you please go ahead and do that? Also, please hit that like button. And if you would like to support our show, to give us some regular monthly support, you can go to patreon.com/DueDissidence, DueDissidence.substack.com. Or you can join right here on YouTube. Just hit that join button. It's right next to the subscribe button. If you can't see it, you may have to stretch your browser screen out a little bit in order for it to show up. But that join button is there. So if you could do that, that would be amazing. Thank you guys so much. We are going to be on Revolutionary Blackout Network again this Tuesday. We're doing another panel with Kit from Hardlens Media and Nick and CJ. They just put the link out right now, actually. So I'll retweet that as soon as I'm done. But that'll be Tuesday night at 8 o'clock. They already posted the itinerary here. So that should be a fun one. We're looking forward to that. Always a great time talking with them. And so we hope you can jump over to RBN and have some fun with us on that night. That'll be Tuesday at 8 o'clock. RFK Jr. wouldn't censor your Pfizer chat. Well, that's one thing in his column. Who censored it? We didn't censor it. I don't know if the platform censored it.
We didn't do nothing. Take down anything.
We didn't do nothing. We didn't do nothing.
Come on, man. We even let that fucking CIA jerk off in here.
Yeah, right. We even let him come in here. It's a free speech platform, indeed. Even though he called me a fucking asshole last week. But anyway, thank you guys very much.
That's just what he does.
Yeah, indeed. Alrighty, guys. Well, thank you. We'll be on RBN on Tuesday. We will be back here on Thursday at 8 p.m. For those who are new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. Please, please, please hit the subscribe button. That's free. You don't got to join for a monthly membership fee, but hit that subscribe button. That's free to do. Tuesday, we'll be on RBN. We'll be back here on Thursday night at 8 p.m. Live streams every Sunday at 7, every Thursday at 8. We also have an audio podcast. We publish the live streams to the audio feed. Go to DueDissidence.substack.com to subscribe there. You could do that for free as well at DueDissidence.substack.com. You get the audio episodes, you get the live stream announcements, and you get the written articles when we drop them. Russell and I each dropped a written article recently, so we're going to try and start to do more of those. Thanks, everybody, very much. You were a great crowd, as always. We'll see you Tuesday on RBN, back here on Thursday. In the meantime, of course, as always, be safe and be well.
Oh, shit. Courage!
Beautiful.
Please clap.